We're all just gonna corpse.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, YouTube. Welcome back. We have another week of Writers and Recs. I am Dawn. Joining me is Abby and Ivy. We are here to give you our recommendations and to talk about like little topics that are near and dear to all of our hearts. This week is the one that we have been waiting for, and we are going to be talking about some of our favorite adaptations. Um, because I don't want to sit here and just talk forever in a year. It was a topic that I loved and is near and dear to my heart. It's near and dear to all of our hearts, to be totally honest with you. So I will lob this over to Abby so she can get us started, get this ball rolling.
Oh gosh, I've got too many notes. Like I could probably get us started and finished by the time I'm done. But I'm going to start with non-Jane Austen things.
Okay.
I have my Jane Austen section is very comprehensive. This entire side is all Jane Austen.
Oh wow.
But okay, so just quick thoughts. It 2017. The first chapter is perfect, really well done. Actually, better structured than the book, because they did it as like a complete story. Part two, which was 2019, not as much. I still think it was good, and I think people were really, really unfair on it just because the first was so good. But the problem is, it's so much scarier and more poignant and more interesting when they are kids, Whereas in part two, it's just not as scaring adults as it is children. And it was the same problem the 1990 miniseries ran into. So we can blame it all on Stephen King's ending and the whole spider thing, but even the spider was just the one of the forms, one of the many forms it could take.
I think when you see the 1990 miniseries, you see where it flags and what would have been Night 2 a lot. It has that same problem of like, oh, they sit around and they have Chinese food, and the Chinese food fortune cookies turn into like eyeball. Like it has a lot of time spent recollecting what they can't quite remember as children. So it's not, even the structure of the original novel doesn't hold up for the
tone.
Which is
when Pennywise is scaring them as children, he's creepy to me. When Pennywise is scaring them as adults, I'm just laughing my ass off, which is still good because Tim Curry does an amazing job.
Oh, you're talking about the miniseries, yeah.
Consistently.
Well, it's because it's Tim Curry.
Yeah, it's Tim. And I'm not saying that I don't like Bill Skarsgård's approach to the clown, which is
he was
very,
much
very scary.
scarier. He was much scarier all around.
But Tim Curry like just going for it and like what you can do on daytime, like primetime ABC on like 1990 as far as standards and practices, that is still really fun. Like you're right, it's Tim Curry and he's always like the best.
It's basically the main reason clowns are scary.
Tim Curry is the type of actor that no matter what movie he is in, he knows what movie he's in.
Oh, have you ever seen the Halloween special, The Worst Witch, where he's like,
yes,
you have. I've seen your reaction because you're laughing your butts off. But he's like the Grand Wizard or whatever, and like he has a musical number, and it's amazing. It's like this cheapy, like it looks like it's shot on video thing, but it's Tim Curry
or
shows
Legend
giant
as the beast monster in Legend.
Oh yeah, he's
Darkness.
great.
He's the darkness, yes.
He's in like the smoggy thing in Fern Gully, right? Like wherever he shows up, he's just chewing scenery like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah. I will say that like
he even chewed the scenery in Mighty Max. Okay,
I haven't even seen that one.
Mighty Max is again, speaking of about an adaptation. Mighty Max were these little tiny toys that came out they were about this big. They were action figures that came out in about the 90s, I want to say. The genius thing, and of course, because they were trying to sell toys, they decided to make a cartoon about it. Tim Curry did the voice of the villain, shocker, Skullmaster.
If you hear Tim Curry's voice, run, he's coming to kill you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, not now. I'm sure he's a lovely man.
And it's the story about this kid that has to jump from place to place to place to try to stop Skullmaster from I forget that he was like collecting artifacts or just doing something. Max just had to stop Skullmaster in order to save the world. And the genius and backwards thing about this series is, and spoiler for Mighty Max, it's a cartoon from the 90s. If really
It's been 30 years, guys. You should get off
Yeah.
of that.
The genius thing is that you're following him throughout this entire series. All of it was based off of his hat. He loses the hat in the last episode. So and they defeat Skullmaster. Max is transported back home. He wakes up. He thinks everything's fine. Next thing you know, there's a knock. He's getting ready for school like any other day. He gets a knock on the door, and there's the package with the hat in it. He realizes that he found himself in a time loop. So technically, like the Dark Tower, it really doesn't end. It just keeps cycling over and over again.
Poor Max.
And it's one of those genius, and like that is so messed up. But he could still go on his adventures with all of his friends. So you're like, yay! But you're like, then he has to fight Skullmaster all over again.
Forever.
No.
It's the Groundhog Day of that. I actually will say one thing about it, chapter 2, the one from like 2019.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that there are things they were able to give more depth to, or like, I guess, make as text that were maybe more subtext in the original book and weren't even discussed in the miniseries. And I think that's like Bill Hader's character, and I can't remember was he Eddie
Richie.
grown up? Richie, sorry, yeah, Richie Tozer, and like his own struggles with his sexuality, and like how he was like he was the one who's fond of Eddie or whatever, and like how they were such like close friends, but always from Hader's side, at least it was more than that. And Bill Hader basically owns that second movie, and he's amazing, and then all of Richie's journey in that is amazing, so it's still worth watching for that. And it's scary. It's just the first one is so excellent, it's hard to like do as well as chapter 1. So, but both are super worth enjoying.
I would say one thing they might have that they did with the kids that they didn't do with the adults is, and this is something they do with kids and teenagers in general, is that they do these little hangs outside of things. Like they were talking about how the cast of Spider-Man Homecoming, they had them all get together and have little pizza parties and watch John Hughes movies. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And stuff like that. And they did the same kind of thing with the kids from It. They made sure they hung out together and everything like that. And it's like another example would be the Friends cast early on in the series to make sure that there was chemistry. They kind of made them sort of hang out together. They went for like a weekend in Vegas, together, so that that sort of cemented chemistry. And I feel like they often don't. I think they were doing that because at the time all the people from Friends, with very couple exceptions, were all newcomers.
Yeah. And
So
Courtney Cox wasn't quite, but a lot of them were.
Yeah, and same with Matthew Perry. He'd done a lot of guest spots on things.
Yeah.
I'd always seen
So
him
did
on
Matt
the
LeBlanc.
other 80 sitcoms.
But I think it was like
Yeah,
they're
Matt
all their
LeBlanc,
first
too.
really
But
big.
Aniston was
show
fairly
kind of
new.
Yeah, Aniston was like coming off a Leprechaun, so we know she was not had a lot under her belt for sure.
Yeah, and it's just, and I think Kudra had been through a lot of pilots and stuff like that. I think she was the original Rosin Fraser, actually. So she was kind of
she
only landed one regular role before that.
I like Fraser. It's okay. The dog is adorable. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
I love Fraser.
I love dogs. So if like you have a cute dog that does cute stuff, I'm into it, man.
I just love pretentious people quoting Shakespeare and using $5 words. And I love the fact that Fraser got most of his line readings from Betty Davis.
Well, they're annoying, but like the dog is cute and he does tricks, and Eddie was super cute. So there you go, dog. Who did
so going back to I honestly think that if they'd taken, instead of just assuming, because you have all these pros together in it, chapter 2, I think they really should have worked on the chemistry between the adults being as good as the chemistry between the kids.
I think that's also something you have to think about. Like, if you're 6 or 7 working adults who are like already established actors with careers, you probably don't have a lot of spaces in your schedules that'll fit like 7 people.
Probably not, but I think it just would have been nice maybe if they.
Oh yeah, totally. I think that could have been part of.
That's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why Lord of the Rings worked so well.
Because they're stuck in New Zealand together.
Yeah, they're all living together.
Yeah, they're all living. They were all living together. They were all hanging out together. They all did like.
The Hobbits are still like friends even now.
Yeah, it was like to the point where the Fellowship went out and they all got tattoos. Like.
Yeah, it's so cute.
With the cast of Community, they still have a text chain together that they're still always talking and hanging out. I'm like, that's awesome.
You mean Grown Up Recess?
That's why it worked so
right? Well. Yeah, one of the
can't unsee that now.
one of the other, no, it's like legit scary, because one of the YouTubers that I follow, Just Right on YouTube,
Oh, me.
he has a video comparing Recess to Community, and it is
So which one's
hilarious.
Spinelli?
I don't know how he broke down everything, but he's like, here is a plot where these two people are trying to fight for
Okay.
being the video kid, and here they're trying to be in the AC club. This person is trying to do this, but they feel comfortable because of this. And then this is an episode here where Spinelli had to go and learn to dance, but she was comfortable because Mikey was there. It was to the point where he was like so conspiracy theory putting things together, where he was like, if you watched Recess and you were in the 4th grade, by the time Community came along, you were in college with Community.
Oh, dun dun
It's
dun.
like, he's like, it's like they made it that way. It is hilarious watching that. So yeah, it's like whenever I hear Recess or Community, I'm like, yeah, you're just.
But they're both excellent shows, so I can't
Yeah.
like complain. I always liked
You could
Recess.
say that every single TV show has a cartoon little brother, or whatever.
Some definitely do.
I was
Some
once
do.
I was thinking of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia being very cartoonish, and kind of reminding me of Ed, Edd and Eddy, because that also involves people like with these ne'er-do-well schemes,
Yeah.
not working out for them.
So back to
Anyway,
adaptation.
sorry. So the yeah, one
Sorry,
thing,
I'm like not a great segue, but I'm like, and then back to
Yeah.
another adaptation. This is something probably nobody's heard of. There's a book and a movie from the early 40s called Random Harvest. It was a 1941 hit book by James Hilton, and then it was a 1942 hit movie with Ronald Colman and Greer Garson. And the funny thing is, I actually think the movie's a little better than the book, but I enjoy them both. The difference with the book is there's a twist in the midpoint of the movie, but because the book is all coming through the narration of one person having a conversation on a train, right? That is, you're only getting that person's point of view.
That feeds into the
So,
unreliable narrator easier.
you don't get the twist until the end of the book, and in the movie it's in the middle, but I think that makes it more poignant. But it basically involves, I won't spoil anything, it involves a guy, World War One. He's British, he's rich, from a rich family, and he gets amnesia and he doesn't know who he is for years, and he ends up having a whole other life with this person, and a child, and another career and everything like that. And then one day he suddenly something jogs him and he remembers who he was, and or he hits his head again. He hits in another accident. It's sitcom amnesia. He hit his head again, and now he doesn't remember the life he had away from his other life in all these years, like something like probably 7 years or something.
So like inverses his amnesia or something.
His family finds out he's alive. He picks up the life he had before, but he's really unhappy, and he doesn't remember this other woman, but he's always thinking about her. So it's really good. Ronald Colman plays the lead, and he has like just this nice vulnerability. I always love how soft-spoken Ronald Colman is, and obviously Greer Garson does a great job. So if you ever get a chance to watch Random Harvest, it's really good. Actually, better than the book, and that's not something that happens a lot. Dolores Claiborne is another adaptation I consider better than the book.
Yeah, Dolores Claiborne's really good. I haven't read the book. I think it's more like a novella it's based on, but the movie adaptation is so good.
Book.
Oh, is it
It's
really?
a novel. I read it. It's all first-person point of view, though. It's all Dolores's point of view, and making Selena an active character in it instead of just Selena's flashback scenes really changed it.
I would say in the movie, Selena has almost more of a point of view because she's the one uncovering what the mystery was behind everything.
She's
And
definitely
it makes it much more
lens.
deeper mother-daughter relationship and
and
honestly
I
reconciliation.
The chemistry between the two of them makes it, to be honest, the folksy, like it's all told in first person point of view from Dolores's point of view, and sometimes the folksy main accent when written out gets a little bit like like
Stephen King.
It gets less folksy and a little bit more cloying, and I'm just like, oh boy. But
Yeah, I had that problem when overall the short story or like the novella 1922 is actually pretty creepy. It's just you have to hear it or read it and it's all first person from like the dad's perspective and you're like, oh, that's but when you like get a
we
distance.
could do an entire episode on Stephen King adaptations alone. There
Well,
are
he has
some,
so many, yeah, and
Yeah.
some of them are pretty
some are
good, and
better
some
than
of
the
them go
books.
off the rails.
Shawshank is
They're
better than the
terrible.
book.
And some of them are terrible because they were made for TV, and some of them are just terrible because they're terrible.
Yeah.
So I'm
I'm waiting for The Stand, by the way, The Stand. That's
the
coming.
oldest stand.
Coming someday.
I can't like the first night is great, and then like by the third night you're like, oh, this is it, and like I get some of that because like 1992 CGI couldn't pull off like
Oh,
an
I know.
ending,
No.
and it just gets worse. I mean, I'm sure it was dated even then, but now you're like,
Some of the
oh, this
casting was
is
perfect.
awful.
Some of it not so much.
But there's a lot of depth of character and stuff that Stephen King misses with some archetypes, and you're just like, oh god, I hope 30 years later they can like make it not as like terribly archetype like.
Depends.
Yeah.
Like Mother Abigail have like backstory or like a personality and like not just be a particular archetype, and you're like,
Whoopi Goldberg's playing Mother Abigail, I think.
Yeah.
she is.
And James Marsden's playing Stu.
I just feel like it's the first time he can be a lead in something because he's always that guy you feel like, oh,
I know.
like Sonic the Hedgehog movies, but I feel like you could have been more famous at some point if things had gone differently.
Even in Westworld, where he's the handsome gunslinger, he's the poor guy who always gets screwed.
Yeah, I think that's literally like cuckold is like literally his job description since like the X-Men movies. But yeah, I mean, Stephen King has a gambit of like adaptations, and some are really good and some are really surprising, and some are like, for example, Shawshank Redemption. Most people don't even know is based on a novella called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, but most people really enjoy it.
Different seasons. Every single one got nominated. Stand By Me, The Body, Apt Pupil got nominated.
In that one.
Adapted.
What's the fourth one?
Huh?
There's four of them. So what's the others?
Apt Pupil, Rita Hayworth, The Shawshank Redemption, The Body, and oh god,
I can't remember the fourth one either.
Now I'm gonna have to look it up because I'm going to go crazy.
What about you? What are some of the adaptations you either really love or really hate, Dawn?
An adaptation that I hate.
We all have
it is one that I try not to talk about too much.
Oh, but let it out.
The last Airbender movie.
Oh no! Oh, that must have crushed your soul. If I had been an Avatar fan, I wouldn't have gone to see it at all.
It was so bad. It was so bad, and also there's also another one that I knew it was going to be bad when they made it. As soon as I saw the cast, I was like, yeah, this is going to go down in flames. I just didn't imagine the dumpster fire that it was going to be.
Oh, do tell.
Dragon Ball Evolution.
My brother is still mad about that. It's been years. And I never liked Dragon Ball Z. I'm sorry. I never did. It's not my thing. I feel like every fight takes 3 or 4 or 8 episodes. I get it. He loves it. He still loves it. He still watches the newest version of the cartoon.
Super.
Still update with But I was like, oh, he won't. If you ask him about that, he'll go for 2 hours. And I'm like, I get it. It's terrible. It's garbage. It is like they just need to keep a license or something, but make it a movie really fast. But
and it's like with both of those movies, and Ivy, I am someone that I enjoy playing Mystery Science Theater when it comes to bad movies. I will gladly sit there and rip a movie apart. I enjoy a good bad movie. I really do. But if it's a bad adaptation and it sucks the joy of ripping it apart out of your soul, it's like you have reached a whole nother level that it's like, okay, this is just really, really bad. Really,
well, I think there's something enjoyable about a good bad movie like The Room, like Troll 2, like Manos Hands of Fate. They're so bad, they're awesome. Avatar: The Last Airbender is just incompetent and stupid. And I think so it's not even enjoyable in its badness.
Yeah, I think Dragon Ball Evolution is bad. I've seen it in a way that it's hilariously terrible, but I don't have any attachment to the source material, to be fair. But it's a hilarious terrible with really terrible effects. But Last Airbender is really dull. The line readings are everybody's on Quaaludes.
Yeah.
From clips I've seen.
When it comes to Dragon Ball, the reason why Dragon Ball Evolution to me is way down in the depths of hell as a bad adaptation is because It kind of shames me that I know this, but, and your brother may get a kick out of this.
He probably will.
There is a Hong Kong adaptation from back in like 92, 93
Yeah, it's been
called
around for
Dragon
so
Ball
long.
called Dragon Ball The Magic Begins, and it's supposed to be a Hong Kong take on Dragon Ball, like the original Dragon Ball.
Yeah, I figured before Z.
And the only really, really good parts about this movie are the Dragon Balls themselves because they look gorgeous, and Master Roshi's house because it is just like epic, and like you see this little quaint pink house, but then you go inside, and Master Roshi, he's supposed to be one of those like perverted, the
Oh yeah,
old
I know.
pervert trope type character, but he's got like this bed that's really a hammock because it's hanging from the ceiling, and
That
it's
makes
just,
sense for Master Roshi.
yeah, and it's like
I've seen enough of the episodes because my brother introduced me to him to know enough about what's what, but not enough to like care.
yeah, and it's like totally, you could sit back and you can have fun ripping that movie apart.
This one is boring. I mean, it's
But
not as boring, but it's just
but
like
Evolution
so
is just
awkward.
like,
It's so
why did
awkward,
you do
weird.
this?
Like, it's not as bad as say Avatar: The Last Airbender, but it's like not. I mean, just flat Last Airbender by what's his face, M. Night
Yeah.
Shyamalan. But like, it's a weird, terrible. Like, I think the reason that it has like at least any life in it at all is, I don't know. It's bad. Like, I guess their version of Master Roshi is more like sort of in your face about stuff, but it's just like
Between
it's
Chow
weird.
Yun Fat being Master Roshi and James Marston,
Marsters, yeah, from
Marsters,
like Spike from Buffy, yeah.
yeah, Spike from Buffy being Piccolo.
It's so much weird casting choices. It's
Yeah.
like someone was really high and just like threw headshots in a pile and was like, "This is
Then you
it,
have
sarcast."
then you have Emily Rossum,
I know, right?
who is supposed to be Bulma, and then you have this dude, and here's where I'm like, this is a bad casting call, because right after they finished filming Dragon Ball,
Yeah.
they started filming Shameless,
Oh.
and the dude that played Goku is her boyfriend on in the first couple of seasons of Shameless.
Oh. Awkward.
Yeah.
No, the whole thing doesn't work. And it's like, and they make it like teenage drama instead of like actually what it is. So it's like any generic I'm a chosen one, I don't want to be, like I'm in high school kind of story. And it's just really like negates anything of like canonical Goku. See, like my brother has dragged me into this enough to know enough.
And really, Goku was too dumb to go to school, period.
And it's so well, yeah, that's true. It's so generic. You're like, this could be anything, and it doesn't have to be called Dragon Ball and be the same, like same setup.
Yeah.
Like an adaptation that's so weak you could just change the title and would be anything else is a bad adaptation.
Yes.
What's a good adaptation you like, Dawn?
A good adaptation that I enjoy. I enjoy the hell out of the BBC America series, The Three Musketeers.
Oh, cool.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen either, but I was just like, that sounds cool.
Oh. Okay. The best season is season 1. It's 3 seasons long.
Or series, as they say in England.
Yeah. Series 1 was the best because they had the best actor playing the villain. And we all know my heart is, if you sell me on a good villain, I am there. Peter Capaldi was playing Cardinal Richelieu.
Oh, that explains a lot.
And he killed it as Cardinal Richelieu. Now, they did change a couple of things here and there, which I'm totally okay with. You know, they made it a little bit more believable, not like the Logan Lerman bastardization.
Oh yeah, that was just
the Three Musketeers.
Let me show off my wife, who's the same lady from all the Resident Evil movies. It's the same like director who was also married to her in real life, and it doesn't work because then she becomes like the lead.
So it was that, and plus, you know, Logan Lerman's hair extensions.
Oh,
They
yeah,
could
that'll
have.
kill a movie.
Yeah, no, they were
Bad hair
not
extensions and
good.
historicals and bad
Bad
wigs
wig.
should be a whole problem.
Yeah,
Bad wig will ruin it.
because it's funny because you see his hair like right here, and the wind is supposed to be blowing, right? His hair that's up here is staying stone cold still. Like they used a whole good can of like 80s Aquanet, right? That is how still the top of his hair is staying. But then down here, it's all blowing in the wind, like,
It's
and it's like, this is bad. Why?
funny that in a movie that bad, you're just like the hair is like the final straw for you.
Yeah. So, but going back to the good Three Musketeers, they went and they changed some things around. They made some things more believable, like Porthos, instead of him being a pirate, he grew up in the slums of Paris. He grew up in the thieves' court because his mother was a former slave. So here you have a Porthos that is half black. And that's where he gets a lot of his boisterousness from. You have
And Dumas
um
was black too.
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
ask.
so that was like the little hat tip to Dumas that they did. Um they went and they set everything up. They had Aramis had an affair with this woman that was in love well, she was the cardinal's mistress. And I'm not really giving anything away because this happens in episode 1, but he was having an affair with the cardinal's mistress. The cardinal found out and killed her instead of trying to go after Aramis. So you see where it's like levels of dirt. And you see that the cardinal is not this benevolent being, because we all know that Cardinal Richelieu is a piece of shit. But you see the levels that he's willing to go to. But then, unfortunately, they killed him off because Peter Capaldi was like, "Hey, I got the offer to do Doctor Who. Peace." And
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, no. Why did you do this?
Well, British series are like that. The reason I even call them series, I think they only contract their actors for like 1 year at a time or something, and that's why they
Mm-hmm.
change their cast so
Kills
much.
me.
Which is like why stuff like Misfits kept having different casts, or like obviously the Queen
Human.
keeps having different casts. Yeah, it makes it harder to like have a series if you like every year or two everybody sort of switches over. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, peace out. So it can be really frustrating.
Yeah. It was funny though that at the beginning of series 2, the beginning of season 2, it opens up with a funeral. And the king is just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. The queen is like, it'll be okay, but he was my friend. And there's a picture, a portrait of Peter Capaldi as Cardinal Richelieu. So it's like they jump right off into it. Yeah, the cardinal's dead. He died in his sleep. So that is a adaptation that I really, really enjoy, the BBC America version of the Three Musketeers. There are a couple of other classics that have been adapted that I do enjoy immensely. We can get into those a little bit later.
I figure some of those will bleed into the Austin ones, perhaps, because so many of those people get really into that somehow.
Yeah, the Jane Austen,
Hatch.
the Jane Austen adaptations scare me.
People are really into them. I mean, we saw the Pride and Prejudice one with Colin Firth when we were in high school because they're like, here's the like BBC miniseries, I guess. So, and it wasn't bad. I liked it. It was just, I'm just not a Jane Austen person, so I feel really guilty that I
Yeah,
don't.
see,
Jane Austen person. I'm the most Jane Austen person you'll ever meet.
So, like, I get it. I know some people are
Yeah.
super into it, but I don't really care. Like, I have wanted to see the new Emma movie, mostly because, like,
now there is one Jane Austen movie adaptation that I really enjoyed, and it may be on your list. I don't know. It's called Bride and Prejudice.
Yes, it's on my list.
Bride and Prejudice, do tell.
It's a Bollywood movie.
Yes, it's so good. It's very catchy too.
It's very catchy. It is. I don't know the dude's name. He was in the movie Torque with Ice Cube. and the female
Martin
lead
Henderson.
is Ashwarya Rai. When she was starting to come to the States in her movies before Harvey Weinstein put a stop to that, but we won't get into that right now. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, I've seen Pride and Prejudice before. That movie has annoyed me to up to here. The only story that annoys me more than Pride and Prejudice is Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, I hate Romeo and Juliet. But I love Pride and Prejudice.
But
I don't hate it. Actually, I get its whole appeal, but
we'll get back to Romeo.
But Romeo and Juliet is like two idiot teenagers who are like,
oh god, I've got a
13
whole
or
thing on
14. It's
Shakespeare
like a billion
adaptations
minutes.
too. That you guys don't even get me started.
But no, it's like when they go and they change the female lead into and they change the culture around it, because now he's going to India. He's trying to do this business deal in India. And of course, she has her prejudices against him because here he is, a white male. He has her opinions against her because she's a very their presence, I'll say. I don't want to say she's a bitch, but she kind of is.
I was gonna just use the word
In your face.
forward, like tell you
Yeah.
spare the words. Yeah, spare the horses.
Yeah. So it was like that one was like I was able to sit down. I was able to be entertained by that one.
You were able to translate it because it was like modern, but it was like related because the cultural difference. I think it's hard sometimes to relate to like what the rules were if you don't understand them from like Regency era. Like I get that they had all these different rules about courting because it's very specific, especially in Regency and Victorian England, but I don't know them. Although after COVID, sorry, said it out loud, after Captain Trips or whatever, I appreciate that now we all understand like maybe we don't need to touch each other all the time. I'm like, hi, you stay 6 feet away over there and we'll have a
yeah.
It's basically COVID rules, the Regency period. Just it's fine between like women can like talk to each other all they want and everything, but men and women, so many rules about who you can speak to, who you can dance with, how many times. Oh, it's so structured, and I love writing in it just because finding ways around it is fun. But if we're on Pride and Prejudice, then I will say that my favorite is, I've said this a billion times, the 1995 Colin Firth miniseries, because I just think it's great. I think it's pretty much almost perfectly cast all around. I prefer it to the 2005, but I do see some of the problems, some of the things people liked in the 2005 version better. Like Colin Firth played Mr. Darcy as just a little bit cold and supercilious, whereas Matthew Macfadyen, he played him more awkward and shy, like, but covering it with like a kind of snobbery, like he was deep down, he was this little teddy. And the same with Colin Firth, but he was just a little more snobby. But then again, he'd just gone through this whole thing where his sister almost got seduced by Wickham, for crying out loud. So the 1995 is still my favorite, followed by Bride and Prejudice, which I love because I think that the fact that there's still arranged marriage and there's still like some strictures in India on men and women makes it a modern day equivalent of some aspects of the Regency period, right? And the other one that I think is awesome is Lizzie Bennet Diaries. It's a YouTube series.
Yeah, I heard that.
It's so good. It manages to take all the qualities of all the characters in Pride and Prejudice and make them relatable to modern audiences and make their problems relatable, and take the things in the Regency period that were keeping them down and translate it to today. So instead of the mother has to marry the daughters off, like, because that's basically the only job a mother has, is getting these daughters out of the house and making sure they're taken care of. It's just, she's pressuring them to go get married, have babies and stuff, but
I was like, that sounds like sometimes some people's modern moms. I know it's different in the Regency.
Yeah,
like I feel like there's still some moms who are like that.
Yeah.
Not mine, thank God, because that would be too much.
The difference is you never meet anybody except mostly, it's almost all women, basically. And even though they do spend a lot of time, like Lizzie and Charlotte's relationship, rather than Charlotte going off to marry Mr. Cullen, she goes on to take a sellout job when Lizzie wants them to be doing like media. Like basically the whole Lizzie Bennet Diaries is her graduate grad school project, right? Which is this experiment of doing this this social media thing where she's doing a YouTube channel. There's like Twitters and Facebooks and Pinterest that tie in depending on the character. Like they have Jane being really into Pinterest because she's like all fashiony, so she's always just modeling different looks and things like that. But she's all sweet. Like they did a really good job casting it. And they really did a really good job with the limitations of it being a vlog. It
Yeah.
was really creative the ways they found. Like you never meet Lizzie's mother. You only see Lizzie's interpretation and impression of her, where she puts on a big hat. It's like, oh, girls, oh, no, and she just like does her own version. You don't meet Mr. Darcy till about halfway through, because you only see Lizzie's like interpretation, where she like puts on a bow tie and a newsboy cap and is like, and does him like he's a robot hipster, And so it's so creative. And the way Lydia's, not to spoil anything, but the way Lydia's story goes is so much better and more sympathetic than in the book.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Lydia's 15 years old,
Yeah. It makes more sense you run off with Wickham when you're 15, you think about it from like that perspective.
Yeah, well, but in
the book, she comes off as like a dumbass.
Well, I feel like Lydia just gets a really, she comes off like, oh, that's silly Lydia and everything. And I get that 15 was a little older then, but it's still freaking 15. So this Lydia is treated.
No, you have a teenager still.
She's 18. She's treated more sympathetically because it's not running off to sleep together. She's obviously virginity is a lost cause with this version of Lydia. She's a party girl, but it's something that's kind of worse. Kind of really would be equivalently bad for the reputation of a girl now, unless she wants a certain kind of career. So it's all really good. It's so good. It's actually it's actually my third favorite version of Pride and Prejudice. And then there's also Bridget Jones's Diary is kind of a very loose modern adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, because you've got Mark Darcy, Mr. Darcy, you've got Hugh Grant as Wickham, but Bridget, she's not very much like Lizzie at all. She's more of an every woman, kind of tossed into the Lizzie.
So she gets to be like a self-insert almost.
Yeah. Like I'd say the modern Lizzie in Bride and Prejudice and the modern Lizzie in Lizzie Bennet Diaries is a little more like book Lizzie, because book Lizzie is very, very sharp-witted and a little bit sarcastic. You know what I mean? And you're not getting that with Bridget as much. Bridget's like more self-deprecating, which I enjoy Bridget Jones's Diary. The first book is basically Pride and Prejudice, more so than the movie is actually. And the second book is Persuasion. And then the third book is screwing her fans over and killing off Mark Darcy. Don't ever read it or touch it, because it's
well, don't kill off your romantic lead. That is a bad idea.
Yeah,
but I will say that some of your mentions of adaptations, it reminded me that there's a really good web series called, I think it's still called Carmilla, which, I mean, we talked last week, and I should apologize, but we talked last week, Dawn, about vampires, and I didn't remember that. I mean, we mentioned there weren't a lot of women vampires that came to mind the way that like a Spike or a Beale or a Dracula comes to mind really fast. And I would say that I would amend that a little bit, but you have to do a deeper dive. And then around the time like Polydorius the Vampire, sorry, my sister, came out, and like at the same time, just about Dracula was about sort of getting prepped. It's about a novel, and it's called Carmilla. I think it's by Sheridan Le Fanu. I don't speak French. And it's a lesbian vampire story. I'm not gonna lie. And so Carmilla is like this countess, and it's very dark and romantic, as much as you can sort of get into the romantic period in the 1800s with like subtext as text. And so someone did a web series adaptation for several seasons of Carmilla that is sort of done in a similar style, where it's a vlog. And in this case, Carmilla is like a vampire, but the main person is a protagonist who is a college student who's investigating weird things on her campus. So you see her in her dorm room talking about things related to like disappearances on campus, and eventually she starts to become part of Carmilla's circle. So you start meeting Carmilla when Carmilla keeps coming into her room. But it's really good. It's really interesting. It's obviously sort of a fem/relationship, but it was really good. It's called Carmilla, and I think the actual web series is Carmilla. Yeah, the book is Carmilla itself.
Okay,
Carmilla. Yeah, it's not as well known, but if you're like really deep dive into vampires, it's one of the first sort of vampire text in like English literature where they're actually starting to make them into
Speaking of
novels.
vampires, I do have
And
thoughts on Dracula, but you guys.
The new BBC one, I haven't seen that one yet, but I will say, if we're also talking about adaptations, I've always liked, and we talked about this last week, the Bram Stoker one it's called Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it's the 92 one from Francis Ford Coppola. I really enjoy, and like they did a bunch of analysis of which ones are like the most like the actual book. And I think there's a BBC miniseries from the early 90s that came up as like the most, but like the Francis Ford Coppola version is like the second most accurate. I mean, I know there isn't, the Mina is really a
There was
reincarnation
some
of lost love
miscasting.
part. Oh, I was about to mention that, but like a lot of it's pretty accurate, which is good. And then like a lot of it, like if you don't want to sit down and actually read the book, like you can get from it. I mean, obviously, if you're going to talk about miscasting, I don't think that are you freezing?
I don't
Definitely.
know.
She must have frozen for a second.
Well, I think she muted herself and then she froze.
She froze. Oh, 1 second. But I'll text her in a second. But I was gonna say Keanu Reeves should never have played a British guy. So give me 1 second to text my sister. She's at the dentist, and
Okay.
she's waiting for mom and dad to pick her up. Mom and dad went antiquing instead because they're idiots.
Okay. Go.
So anyway, I was saying that before random interruptions of the usual form of Zoom and anybody interrupting, apologies. That Keanu Reeves as a British dude, he's Jonathan Harker in this, is not selling me.
No, not at
So
all.
I mean, I get he was trying to stretch, but that was a miscast. And I'm being really nice about it. I mean, it's not as miscast as him in Much Ado About Nothing, which is true. Yeah, but it's not the best. But I mean, a lot of the rest of the cast, Winona Ryder and Gary Oldman, of course, and Anthony Hopkins do make up for that. But he's definitely their weakest link. He is by far their weakest link.
Yeah.
So, and then other things that I like or hate as adaptations. Also, the one I hate the most, we'll get into in a little bit because it gets into a whole discussion. But I really enjoy Forrest Gump as an adaptation because the book is not that good. It's very much a farce. It's kind of in the vein of a Candide or the Hope Valley Hubcap King, where it's like a very farcical book where a lot of silly incidents happen to this guy and there's really no depth to it because it's supposed to be all satire, but it's kind of like heavy-handed.
The narration of Book Forest is a lot more is a lot less.
He's not likable
than Tom Hanks. He's not as likable. Yeah, he's just not as endearing as
yeah,
Tom
and in
Hanks.
the way, I mean, it's very schmaltzy. As I've gotten older, I can see a lot of the holes in the movie because I feel like there's a lot that should have been, of all characters, I feel like there's 3 different stories that are far more interesting if they'd been from Ginny, Bubba, or Lieutenant Dan's perspective that are the real meat of the stories, and then they're just not explored because we have a 4th person who's sort of the outside observer. And we talk about unreliable narrator because Forrest is simple. You don't really get the depth from him. He just sort of passes through history as things happen to him, which I think is a comfortable way to look at it in the 90s, but it isn't as interesting as the stories that you really could have seen had you explored it from Bubba's perspective, from Ginny's perspective. Like we have a whole story that touches on the AIDS crisis and we don't really even see the AIDS crisis. You have a whole story that touches on a man who is trying to recover from having been through the horrors of Vietnam, and eventually has a story where he reconciles and is able to, if you notice at Forrest's own wedding, he brings his wife Susan, who's of Asian descent. So I don't know if she's Vietnamese necessarily. He doesn't mention it in the movie, but has recovered that much to deal with his trauma. And you have the story of Bubba, who dies, in Vietnam, and like what his relationship with his parents are, and like any of that explored. Or then they become wealthy because they get a shot of the
I think
the shrimping fortune. So I think you miss a lot of the depth in that, even in the film itself. Like I would have preferred almost if they ever remade Forrest Gump as a way where it's more like a style of triptych stories, or a style like you get 4 perspectives as sort of interwoven anthology of tales. Like that would make a lot more sense because it would actually show some depth in narration than just sort of the outside dude perspective.
I agree because I feel like a lot of the point of the story is there are a lot of things more interesting than Forrest himself happening around him, which includes Bubba, Jenny, Lieutenant Dan, and obviously all the events of the world. But he treats everything except for the people he's closest to and cares about the most like just a passing thing. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't really care about Kennedy or Nixon. Like he doesn't really care that he's a ping pong champion. It's just as nice for him to get an ice cream cone somewhere. So I think that, I guess it's the fact that if you were to get other perspectives, the general comedy of the fact that he's oblivious to all these important things happening around him, and that they like that they don't really touch him is part of the comedy,
Yeah, I think that is part of it because it comes from the original book, which is very much a satire, so this softens it. But I think if you were really mining the same material in a more honest light, that you would have to. I mean, if anybody ever readapted Forrest Gump, not the movie itself, but from the original book, and wanted to really go for Ginny, Bubba, and Lieutenant Dan's stories, that they would really want to look at them as almost like parts of a triptych, because the least interesting part of Forrest Gump is actually Forrest Gump. And so you sort of
Well, yeah, but that's
wash
part of
over the 60s, 70s, and part of the early 80s with these huge traumatic events, with almost like a band-aid. So while
And
I
see,
like
I
the
think
movie a lot
that's
going
part.
up,
I think that's part of the reason why Forrest Gump was a success,
yeah,
because we could look at these legit horrifying events and look at them through the eyes of it's not so bad.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, he's an innocent, and that's why his point of view uh, is a little bit gentler on some certain events that seem a little bit harsh to us.
Yeah.
I think there is a point to have that he has the hope for it, but I think it, because of the way he is and the fact that he is obviously someone who has a lower IQ or whatever, or he's slow or that kind of thing, that he sees it in a childlike way, but it allows the audience to safely put their feelings in a childlike space of, but things get better. There's, you do the best with what God gave you, or like my mama always said. So there is that innocence in it, but then it allows the audience to take that perspective and not question things deeper, which is very comforting when I saw it when I was 11. But the older I get, the more I see where it creates a false cocoon that doesn't really deeply examine the source material or the source historical events, and that's uncomfortable in a way. And it's weird to see a story where you see scenes interspersed, in this case, say example, for a woman dealing with like developing AIDS and having all these things happen to her and like domestic abuse, but it is sort of just like the side note to whatever Forrest is doing. And you can say the same thing with Lieutenant Dan or Bubba and things like that. So it almost like trivializes them as like aspects of the story, but not worth being delved into.
Yeah.
I guess I could see that perspective. I feel like that if those events had been treated a lot more heavily than they were, I don't know if the film would have been it would have been a lot more depressing. Is all.
Well, yeah, I think
Not,
you'd have
it
to
would
accept
not
that
be
the
the
tone was
success
going
that
to be
it
different.
was.
No, God, no.
It totally would not be the success that it
So, I
was.
mean, I think you would have to lose the tone that was originally set up in the satire of being sort of funny, which they softened it being more like mawkish and sentimental. But like, if you made it a third time and it were more honest, then it would definitely be something that's more reflective and like, I don't want to say gritty reboot, but it would be more reflective of the times, which were, we're not something to soften over. But I do like it. I do appreciate it for what it was, but I can see with, 1994, like 26 or 27 years of perspective, and I'm old now, but like how it glosses over things. But it still doesn't mean I don't like the film, and the soundtrack's awesome. It's just I can see where it has a myopia that I wasn't aware of when I was like 11. But another adaptation, and then this is my sort of adaptation thing, like if you are into Jane Austen, or you sort of get into like where manga is adapted correctly or not for anime, just bear with. Planet of the Apes is actually based on it's based on a short novel by Pierre Bol, who's a French novelist who wrote also The Bridge Over the River Kwai, called Monkey Planet. It doesn't sound as good in French.
In French, yeah, I know.
Monkey Planet doesn't have the same ominous tone somehow. And I am a huge fan of the 1968 film with Charlton Heston that was screenplay is actually by Rod Serling, who created The Twilight Zone. So like it has a lot of great parts to it. A lot of it is about a debate between theology and what's owed in truth and science, because the minister of science is also the head minister of the faith council for the apes. Which so it brings a lot of chance for Rod Serling to debate like how do religion and science interact with each other. I know it sounds weird because there's people in monkey suits. I get that, but it has a lot of depth and nuance to it. The same kind of thoughts that he brought to the Twilight Zone, he brings into that adaptation. So it's very good, and I'm a huge fan. So like when they readapted it, God help me.
Oh, Tim Burton.
I think I was still in high school. Yeah, I think I was still in high school. So the Tim Burton version, which is dog shit. It's terrible.
The one with Marky Mark.
Yes. Yeah, super bad, super terrible. It ends because like, oh, we already used the Statue of Liberty, let's just use the Lincoln Memorial, so now he's a monkey. And I'm like, all of it is terrible. the makeup effects are pretty good. Like I do hats off to the last bit of practical effects, which are Rick Baker did a great job, but the screenplay's terrible. Mark Wahlberg's terrible. None of the nuance or obviously brilliance of Rod Serling's original script is there. It's just I saw it once and it's completely embarrassing how terrible it is. Like I like to think it never happened.
Well, and here's my little caveat, because I
You like
was
Marky Mark
never
and the
in.
Funky Bunch?
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not someone that was into, honestly, the monkey suit scared me. So
I
I was,
love them. I was like, this is why I like monkeys, but I get it. They're
no,
intimidating. Like the practical effects can be
they
intimidating.
scared me.
Well, I think it's part of it's supposed to be startling. All of a sudden, you come across them and they're all apes, and it's completely topsy turvy.
Yeah,
It's supposed to be unsettling.
The original Planet of the Apes. My dad would watch it over and over again. It was one of the movies I would tolerate.
But here's is me asking this as an honest question.
Yeah.
When the Marky Mark version came out, the only like movie he really had under his belt was like the big hit. Did you really expect it to be good?
I don't know. I didn't know much about him. I'm sorry.
It wasn't
No, he'd been in A Perfect Storm before. Like that was in '95. So
okay,
he was fine in that. He's fine in that. I don't know. It was terrible. So like the book itself is actually a light satire as well. It's almost much more like, bear with, the Planet of the Apes in the 1960s and 70s is actually a 5-movie saga, and there's the Planet of the Apes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which is not very good, but it's very much part of its time with the nuclear hysteria. Then there's Escape from Planet of the Apes, which really is a satire where
I like that one.
Come back in time, and it's like it's really good, and that's mostly in the spirit of the original book.
Yeah.
There's Battle for Planet of the Apes and Conquest of Planet of the Apes, I believe is the way it goes. And they're all really good, and they all have very different, the tones of all 5 are extremely different, which is interesting because as the saga develops, it has very different metaphors and ideas behind it. But then you get to the Marky Mark one, which is, I guess, just a cash grab because it's terrible and it's full of all the usual Tim Burtonisms.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that because the material is so, even the original material from Pierre Boulle is so loose, and it's really just the idea of what can you see as reflections of our society, from society where, for whatever reason, apes evolved from men. They use it as different types of metaphors. Obviously, in the original 1968 movie, it's, oh God, we're all going to die. Nuclear war is going to ruin us. Spoilers. Duh. Like, we have a nuclear war, and then after that, evolution kind of starts over again, and our bad. We blew ourselves up. The Marky Mark Wahlberg movie has nothing to say, except we can waste a lot of money. And then, but what I do like is the Planet of the Apes that they did, or the Dawn of the Planet of the Apes they did in the like 2011.
Yeah, Franco and
the one was starring James Franco. I have the first one of that series because I was just curious about it, and
Were you a Curious George about it?
No. No.
But
I was curious about it, and one of my nieces refuses to watch that movie with me ever again because I will admit I Mystery Science Theater the entire scene where Caesar stood up to the bully monkey.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's going down, and the bully is just like, I'm watching it, and this is about the 3rd or 4th time that I have seen the movie, and by then there is 0 chance of me having like any sort of filter. That's so fair. That someone who is just watching it for the first time, oh yeah, they're gonna get the side commentary, and they're gonna be like totally ridiculous. They're gonna be like totally like, I can't watch this movie with you anymore, which is exactly what happened. Because the bully monkey was bullying Caesar around.
Well, technically chimpanzees are apes, just so you know.
Okay.
It matters to me.
Okay. Well, the bully, he was beating up on Caesar. Caesar had enough of it. And I was like, watch this. And she goes, what? I'm like, and then Caesar starts going in. I'm like, see, he's like, bam, I will fuck your ass up. Don't sit here. Be my cookie bitch now. You
He's
are my
revolution. You don't fuck with him. But yeah, so I like that adaptation, but then you see the adaptation of what is the scary thing of our time. I'm not talking about talking monkeys, obviously, or apes.
Yeah.
Again, in the 60s, there's a reflection of the Cold War, and we're going to use nuclear weapons to end us. In the 2010, 2011, it's we are doing genetic modification on viruses that we don't, or on medical technologies we don't understand the full ramifications of, and what started as a noble endeavor to fix Alzheimer's becomes something that mutates into a virus we can't stop. And the final scene is really chilling to me because it's someone who's infected with having had the injection of the treatment, or for whatever reason, or exposed to it, gets on a plane, and then they just show you how many planes go where, and like all the boards of what's arriving and departing from
yeah.
now. And I'm like, oh, because like now we're here living in Captain Trips, and it was passing fancy at the time of like how fast something can spread. But now you go, oh, that was super accurate, because once you can get on international plane travel, you're done. Like it's over if something's super contagious. And so it's oddly prescient in a weird way.
And see, that scene, it didn't bug me out nearly as much because I had already seen quite a few Resident Evils. And
to be fair, Outbreak hits that same sort of point, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and it's like by then it's like, yeah, if it's gonna happen, this is how it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen because
which is how it did with international travel.
Yeah.
But like I think the reason that version works, and that trilogy is, I haven't seen the other two because I know something that they used from a plot point from the final film of the original. I just can't watch Caesar's kid get killed. I need a breather. So like I can't deal with that. Like I was like, when the second movie came out, I was like, oh, I can't. I'm in a bad mood. I don't want to watch a baby monkey get killed. I can't do it. But like the reason that trilogy I think works and resonated is because they learned to couch the technology and the metaphor toward the fears of our time, where at the time the fears, and now still are, what are biological agents, or what is the ramification of medical sciences that we don't understand right now, as opposed to 50 years ago, we're in nuclear war. What are we going to do if we accidentally nuclear bomb ourselves into nothing? And I think because both of those actually asked in a science fictional way, like what are the extensive technologies that we don't understand, and how can they hurt us, and where can we go from that? And then, okay, ape society, whatever.
Yeah.
The one that Tim Burton made didn't bother to ask any questions and just wanted to be a lot of cheap, echoey shout outs to the original with no actual substance. But the truth of science fiction is it should ask, with a black mirror, like a crazy reflection, like what was going to distort and what is like near possible, or even if it's far possible, what reflects our own natures. And Tim Burton's version doesn't do that. Although that brings me to my next set of adaptations, because what is that kid's name? The guy who played Draco Malfoy, forgive me.
Oh, yeah.
He's in the original, I mean, not the original, but he's in the first Planet of the Apes.
He's in the Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was
Harry Potter adaptations.
Cheering when he got his.
I know, right? He plays a terrible person in that one too, but my thoughts are like Harry Potter adaptations kind of are hit or miss for me, because I know as the books get longer, you can't film a 1,000-page book. But Order of the Phoenix is probably my least favorite book to movie adaptation of all time, because I feel like they cut out huge chunks of it. If they had just like tried to cut it down but make it 2 movies, it might have worked better. But I feel like they lost the nuance, and they lost the nuance of that whole, well, yeah, the prophecy was vague. It could have been any kid who would have been born that year in July who lost parents, and oh, Neville did too, so maybe Neville could have been the chosen one, and maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where Voldemort misreads it the whole time and he's made his own enemy, which is super fascinating to me, and it gets lost in the movies completely. But there's a whole bunch of other things with the nuance of the training for the dark arts and all that stuff. It gets lost when they compress it to like just a 2.5-hour movie. But that's where I stopped watching. I didn't watch 6 and I didn't watch 7 part 1 because I was like, oh, they butchered Order of the Phoenix so badly. I watched the final movie because I was like, I should at least see that. But it just made me really frustrated. Like I already was kind of frustrated with a lot of things that get left out of Goblet of Fire. By the time I got to Order of the Phoenix, I'm like, you're not able to compress these movies to like match the books. And it's just not enjoyable for me. But yeah, continue with Harry Potter adaptations.
Yeah, the Harry Potter, I enjoyed Harry Potter for what the movies for what they were. That is my superpower, I will say. Whereas I can sit back and I can for the most part, I can differentiate one story being told from another story being told. Like I can sit back and I can be entertained by Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. I can be entertained by Disney's Robin Hood with the foxes, which I love Oodalali.
Can you be entertained by the one with Jamie Foxx that's so terrible? And
No.
I didn't think so. It's
No.
amazingly bad, though. It's one of my amazing bad movies.
I
Oh
like
my God. I'm like,
Oh, Taron
how?
Egerton also gets a lot of hate for that because obviously he's their Robin Hood and he's terrible in it.
And you know what? I don't even think that he was a bad actor on it. On my own YouTube channel, on my own personal YouTube channel, I have a like 20-minute rant about this movie.
Is it you who called it? Someone I know calls it, or maybe a reviewer called it Zero Dark Loxley, and it's kind of like that. Like they tried to make like a war film from like modern day, but
That
like
is what
made
they
it into
did. I did not call it that.
It was a review channel, but this is a good
My
version of it.
my doppelganger is kind of embarrassed because Jamie Dornan plays Will Scarlet.
Yeah, he
So
does.
so I call him 50 Shades of Scarlet.
Uh
So
Jamie Dornan, you know you've shown up in a quality movie because he existed as there and saying lines. You're like, oh, this is gonna go great.
but no, and see, I had so much hope for him because I loved him as the sheriff in Once Upon a Time.
I do like him in The Fall. He's a great serial killer. It's a really short-lived, like 3 seasons, Gillian Anderson series on the BBC, and it's on Netflix, I think. And he's great there. They just let him be an Irish serial killer. He's really good at that.
But here's Lena Chief Christian Grey. Um,
Oh yeah,
but
all the time.
but no, it's like I can differentiate versions, and I can sit back and be entertained by things for what they are. Um, I can sit back and, let's face it, I'm a video game person. I can be entertained by video game adaptations of movies.
Which we know
That be,
never.
that
Yeah.
being said, there are hardly any good ones.
Yeah.
The at the time of its release, the original Mortal Kombat,
I like that movie though.
that was the best one.
That's not untrue.
You know,
You compare it to like Mario Brothers or like
Mario Brothers
one with
failed.
Rajulia, the
Street
Street
Fighter
Fighter.
failed, but Street Fighter was awesome because of Raul Julia.
Well, he's great. Well, he was. I mean,
Yeah.
rest in peace. But like they were so out, like it's like they got the video games and they're like, let's not do the plot of the actual video game. Let's just call it that video game. So at least Mortal Kombat does what it's supposed to do.
Right. And then they like totally dropped the ball when they decided to do the second movie.
It's Annihilation, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard that one's terrible. I've never seen it.
Don't do it to yourself.
Good. Won't do it. But yeah, no, if you're a video game fan and you have to wait for like movie versions of your video games, there's
if you look at
a lot of patience there.
If you look at video game adaptations, I could sit back and I could be entertained by them. I can see where they pass. I could see where they fail. The Assassin's Creed adaptation was a phenomenal fail.
Heard that too. I will say that I haven't played any of the Silent Hill games, but I actually kind of find, as a horror movie fan, even if people hate it, the first Silent Hill works for me because I think the visuals are so strong. So, I mean, I can see what you mean about appreciating for what it is. Like, there's things we can sort of appreciate for that type of medium because film is different than video game.
Right.
I can't get the first person.
An adaptation of The Last of Us for Netflix. And this tiny part of me is almost like, why? Because the character design on the video game is so good and the voice acting is so good that it was really an entertaining game. I don't even play. I just watch it.
And see, that's with a couple of the video games that are coming out now that they're adapting for movies. The latest Tomb Raider with I do not know the actress's name.
She's the girl from
all I know,
Thrones, right?
All I know is that she is married to Michael Fassbender, and it also Daniel Wu
Alicia Vikander? Is her name Alicia Vikander, I think?
Yes.
I'm always forgetting.
Yeah, that was her, yeah.
That movie they did not need to make it because the video games, especially a lot of the single player games now, they are so intricate and the cutscenes are woven into the gameplay so much that you can legit sit down and watch a let's play and you will be entertained as if you paid $20 to go to the movies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't even watch I don't even watch video games. I don't play video games, but I have a friend who sends me really good let's plays of indie horror games. That's how I saw obviously Five Nights at Freddy's, etc. So I'll watch people play like really scary horror games. It's usually the indie titles, and I'm like on YouTube or like Twitch or whatever, and it's like you're right, it's
Yeah.
free. I have to pay
I never
$20
played
to adapt it.
I never played South Park: The Stick of Truth, but I was really entertained watching it. You know, I'm
When I
laughing
was
my
a
ass.
kid, I called Let's Play just making my brother play through Donkey Kong when I got stuck. But same
Exactly.
idea. It's like my brother is playing for me. It's great because he's really good. I'm just terrible at games.
Yeah, and
Games except for logic puzzle based games like the Nancy Drew games, and that's my thing I play.
I tapped out at Super NES. Once it got to like
I used to play game
64,
show
I
games,
couldn't do it.
games. I was always good at those. I would kick ass at Jeopardy.
Oh yeah,
the
me
video.
too. Although my two favorite video games I had as a kid were Donkey Kong Country and actually The Lion King for Super NES. So like you can tell I
Oh,
was super
like,
cool.
yeah.
I know Don's over here going, "Oh, holy shit!"
Art. You know, I just
and I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm on Facebook bitching about a 3-hour demo
I know,
last night
like
on the Switch.
my skills just never like evolve. But even I get the idea of like, oh, this is a cool horror game. Let me watch a Let's Play of it so I can
Yeah.
enjoy it. But yeah, I don't need to like pay for a movie for $20. Which speaking of, AMC was going out of business, so I wonder how many movie theaters are going to survive after 2020.
I don't know.
What else is going to survive after 2020? I don't know. No one knows. We have murder hornets now.
Speaking of adaptations that are rarely good, which video game adaptations rarely are, you know,
It happens.
What's it called? I was thinking about Shakespeare adaptations last night and trying to think of which ones came to mind as ones I like unequivocally love. Most of them I just have really mixed feelings about. Can you guys think of any like oh, this is a great Shakespeare adaptation? That includes reimaginings.
I'm not a really big Shakespeare expert, so help me with things. I like Kenneth Branagh's Henry IV, but I'm not really married to the play, so I don't feel so bad. He does a good St. Crispin's Day speech in that, so I do just go with it, guys. I'm sorry. I like Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. I know Baz Luhrmann's an acquired taste. I like him. I like also
I like him.
I
like his
my brain is splanking with Nicole Kidman and Ewan McGregor. Help me, Moulin Rouge. But I think you have to kind of either like Baz Luhrmann and his style, or you kind of don't. Like, there's no in between. That's it. That's my list. I'm done now. I do like Danny DeVito and Renaissance Man, where he explains Hamlet to people. That's kind of fun, but that's about it.
I prefer Shakespeare. I'm a theater major, so I've got a lot of Shakespeare in here, and I prefer Shakespeare live for the most part. I've actually rarely seen a movie Shakespeare I like, just because I feel like you need the audience experience to truly make it shine. So there's not as many awesome Shakespeare's as there should be, in my opinion. But one I'm always, well, first of all, 10 Things I Hate About You as Tammy the Shrew.
That's super cute.
Great. It's a lot of fun, and it just
it holds up for like a 90s teen movie too, or like an early 2000s movie. It's pretty
another one that a lot of people don't like, but I do, is Love's Labor's Lost, reimagined as a Hollywood screwball musical, set in the like late 30s, right? Right before World War II struck. They basically set it there, and they toss in Cole Porter and Gershwin, and I'm here for it, because like that is basically my repertoire with Kenneth Branagh, Matthew Lillard, Alessandro. Oh God, I always forget his last name. Cute short guy. He's a pocket high.
Wait, Matthew Lillard is in a Shakespeare movie?
Yeah, he's in a musical. It's a musical too. And
you mean the guy from Scream and Scooby-Doo, right? Just for our audio. Well, good for him. I would not have seen that coming.
And Wing Commander.
He's only okay. At least
he tried. It's the Keanu I'm going to stretch for Shakespeare thing.
They cast Alicia Silverstone in the second female lead, and she's got a song, and she really can't sing. So they shouldn't have done that.
Singers.
But she does a good job besides that. But it's good. Matthew Lillard, Alessandro. Oh my God, it's gonna kill me. I can't remember his name, but he's cute. He's a British actor. He's really good looking. And what's it called? Kenneth Branagh directed it. It's really Timothy Spall's in it. Quite a few other Hey It's That Guy types. I recommend checking it out if you ever see it on cable or something. I think that's how I saw it, and I was like, "Ooh, it's not perfect, but I really enjoyed watching it. It was just like a fun experiment of let's make a Hollywood screwball musical. The outfits were all like late 30s fun, the hair, the music, the mood, you know. And another one I liked was 1999's Titus, directed by Julie Taymor, with Anthony Hopkins,
Yeah, I've
and
heard that one.
like it was so
I only
good.
know because my brother had to like do like a senior high research project on Titus Andronicus. I'm like, what the hell is that? So he got like one no one
Oh,
heard of, so we had to like dig it up. Um,
that
but
scene where they put the freaking branches and the blood's coming out of Lydia's mouth. Oh boy, you
I will
know.
say you mentioned two things that reminded me of stuff. Because I don't know a lot of Shakespeare. I'm sorry, they made me read it in high school. That's as far as I got. I haven't seen but so many. But I will say that there's a BBC version where they did a couple different Shakespeare plays updated, so it's not in Shakespearean speech. It's just in
Yeah.
regular people English. And they did a Much Ado About Nothing that said it like said it like a what's the word I wanted? TV station. And so that's where sort of Beatrice and Benedict are working against each other as like he's
Oh,
returned as
that's
an anchor. They have a
okay.
checkered history, and it's that dude from the first season of Homeland who's like the redhead. He's like one of the leads, and the really surprising part is that in that also is Billie Piper from Rose from
Oh yeah, Doctor Who.
Doctor Who, and
Doctor
she's
Who.
really good at it. She like steals the show as like the best part of that, surprisingly, because I like her as Rose, but I didn't know she was quite as good a dramatic actress. So that one's pretty good. And also, I will say my favorite adaptation of Hamlet is actually The Lion King. So
Yeah.
because y'all know it's true. And then I
Yeah.
love that they went like
What about
one
Tommy
more.
Boy? Tommy Boy's basically Hamlet.
Well, no, Lion King's
Not
better because
really.
then they did Lion King 1.5 or like whatever for like direct to video, which is like Lion
Yeah, no,
King,
it
Timon
doesn't
and
ca-
Pumbaa's
it doesn't
Adventures, whatever.
exist.
But it's like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Like they definitely took the same format to that to do like
Yeah.
the side characters version of Hamlet. So I thought that was kind of clever. It's dumb, but I thought it was clever to go with a child animated version of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. But yeah, Hamlet's my favorite. I mean, Lion King's my favorite Shakespearean movie. There
Rosencrantz
you
and
go.
Guildenstern Are Dead is absolutely an amazing play. Tom Stoppard is a freaking genius, and everything he does is perfect.
What about you,
Uh,
Dawn? Do you have any Shakespeare ones you like or hate, or just are you in my camp? And where I had to read in high school, but I didn't know a lot of them.
I had to read I read a couple of Shakespeare plays in high school. I enjoyed almost none of the adaptations. The the Shakespeare play that I was basically abused with is Romeo and Juliet, which is why I have so many negative feelings towards Romeo and Juliet. I have always had, because I was a theater kid when I was little. I was in community theater. So when I got into junior high school, instead of putting me into the vocal talent course, which is what I would have wanted to go in, where I could sing, they were like, no, you're going into the drama course because you already have the experience of being on stage. So here you go. So from 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, I got to watch Romeo and Juliet over and over again. That is the only Shakespearean play they allowed us to watch. When I got into
What
high
they thought
school,
was like the least sexual or something.
I guess, I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
Lame.
And
I
then
said
when
they could
I
have done
get
some of the comedies.
then when I
Yeah,
get into
I
high
agree.
school, I'm thinking maybe we can do better. And then it's like, no, we're doing Shakespeare. We're going to read Romeo and Juliet. And then this was around the time Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes came out with their Romeo and Juliet
Which is the
movie,
best London version. So there you go.
and I'm like, oh God, not again.
Well, you can always watch
Um,
West Side Story as a slightly
Oh,
better
that's a good
version.
version. Yeah.
no, I couldn't
Oh,
tolerate that. Hispanic household could not tolerate West Side Story at all.
oh, that would make sense. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
Let's just paint everybody who's not Rita Moreno. And I'm like,
So
Yeah.
so I'm sitting there and I've always been like, why is everyone saying that Romeo and Juliet is this epic, tragic love story? No, it's two horny teenagers that have been told no.
well, it's a tragedy. It's coded as a tragedy, so obviously, but everybody thinks it's great. Like, she's 13. They meet for 2 hours of play. He's rebounding from some other chick named Rosalind. Like,
Yeah.
true facts, guys. True facts.
So,
I would say I would not paint Shakespeare by the least of his works. I would say Romeo and Juliet is the least worthy of
And
his
it's just
work.
ripping off Paramus and Thisbe anyway.
so
That's also true facts.
and then here's where it gets interesting. few years ago, I found out that there was an anime adaptation called Romeo Juliet. If you don't pronounce the X, it's
Okay.
Romeo X Juliet. It's just Romeo Juliet. I love that adaptation.
Is it because it's more gory than usual, or is there another reason?
A little bit. But they also
I know you.
they also give actual reasons. And this is something, it's not a play that takes place in a span of a week. It's a series that takes place over the span of months.
That makes more sense than I saw you at a party
Ju-
once, and now we're gonna get married.
Juliet is Juliet, her family ruled the kingdom, the Capulets. They ruled the kingdom of Neo Verona. It's a sci-fi take on it too.
I was waiting for that part.
Something else. It's a sci-fi take on that too, where she is the princess of Neo Verona. But when she was about 5 or so, a coup happened. Both of her parents were killed. One of her maids wrapped her up, got her out of the castle. They ran into a couple of knights. So these knights secreted her away and hid her into a drama troupe. From then on, they changed her name. They wouldn't allow her to go out dressed up as a girl. She had to pose as a boy for the rest of her life until she was like 16. Well, because, huh?
They're borrowing a little bit from the other place. The breeches.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can't.
Oh,
remember.
it gets even better because they're hiding in a theater troupe, right?
Yeah.
The main writer is a blonde known as Will.
Oh, clever.
Yeah. So it comes out that now the new rulers of Neo Verona are the Montagues. Romeo's and because the Montagues are ruling everything with like an iron fist, Juliet, who has been studying swordplay because of the plays and everything, she has been going out as this vigilante known as the Scarlet Rapier or something like that. The Red Whirlwind, the Scarlet Whirlwind or something like that.
This is way more interesting than Romeo and Juliet already. Holy shit.
So she's going out there and she's trying to protect the people. Romeo sees her and helps her, not realize he sees this dude that is trying to help someone because Romeo is a cinnamon roll like that. He is trying to help this dude. So he goes and he helps him escape the guards and everything. He throws all the guards off of their trail. And he's just like, okay, whatever. And Juliet's like, okay, he was kind of cute. So then another point in time, Juliet, she goes off on her own, but she goes off on her own and she's in a dress.
It's almost like there's layers of mistaken identity because they don't know she's Capulet, but they also don't know she's a girl at all. So there's so much between them that's keeping them apart.
Looks like it's a bit of much ado about nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Not that one. I was getting mixed up.
It's a bit of Rosalind and Orlando, as you like it.
So
yeah, because she's not a guy for realsies. Yeah, that's pretty clever.
Yeah, and then so he sees her in a dress as a girl, and he's like, okay, she's really cute. And they're trying to do this back and forth. They're meeting up secretly. They're having this secret courtship and everything.
Guys, you'll get it. Poor Juliet, she triangle for two'd herself. She did a Superman and Clark Kent. Shit.
So no, it doesn't go on for too long when he finds out that the Red Whirlwind is the girl that he's like been pining for. You know, they get trapped out in the rain and they have to take shelter in this one place and all of their clothes are soaked and whatnot. And
as you do in anime or any other romantic situation.
Yeah, and then they end up falling, and when he falls, he ends up pushing open her shirt and then he sees her bra and he's like, oh my God. Yeah, that's a whole sort of thing. So yeah. So it's about 26 episodes, and then I hate to be like spoilers, but their deaths make so much more sense.
Well, you have to know that something based on Romeo and Juliet is probably going to go I once wrote a story that was called Cain and Abel, and someone's like, I hope they end up okay at the end. I'm like, they're two brothers who are in conflict, and the story's called Cain and Abel, and I can't help you if you can't figure out that this is not going to end well. Like,
yeah,
sorry.
A couple more Shakespeare's actually. There's
Now
Richard
I'm gonna
the
check out
Third,
that anyway.
Ian McKellen, in like mid 90s is where all the Shakespeare happened.
Yeah, they had a lot of those too, because they sort of like have one of
It
them.
was great, though. He
What's
does
his
it.
That's
Hamlet
because
with Mel Gibson or something weird.
They said it in the 40s with him being kind of like a dictator type character, like a Mussolini type.
And this is for which one again? Which play?
Richard the Third.
Oh,
And
that
they
makes sense.
they basically, Ian McKellen chews the hell out of all the scenery. He's so good
I would
at
expect no less from Sir Ian McKellen.
I love him. And
We all do.
And then they have another one, The Twelfth Night, also from 1995, starring like Imogene Stubbs and Helena Bonham Carter. It's one of the Breaches roles where a girl, Amanda Bynes did a movie, a modern version, She's the Man.
I was about to say She's the
Night.
Man.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that one.
Where she's posing as her own brother.
For soccer. Why do I know these things about stupid 90s movies? God.
I don't know. They're ubiquitous. Amanda Bynes just had a very ubiquitous early 2000s.
She did.
Yeah.
And what's it called? What's the other? Okay, Twelfth Night, Richard the Third. Oh, Much Ado About Nothing. I will go to bat for it, despite a couple miscast roles.
Keanu Reeves again pops up in that as some dude.
I thought that Michael Keaton stole the freaking movie in these tiny
Which
parts.
he also does.
More, and there should have the music, the art direction, casting outside of Keanu Reeves was pretty freaking solid.
Well, I think that Keanu Reeves figured out what his wheelhouse was, and it wasn't pretending to be British.
Yeah.
But he's great at killing a lot of people, so John Wick has just been very enjoyable for me to watch. I watched all 3 in a row one weekend a couple weekends ago, and you would know why, Dawn, for all my frustrations with certain people in my life, and it was very cathartic. And also, I love dogs, so.
Keanu Reeves is always once he found his niche, he was like, okay, here we go. There was only a few mistakes, actually, but when
we all want to try to be in a Shakespeare play once in a while, except for Dawn, and it doesn't go well. So
Yeah. Well, I could imagine he was getting told from all kinds of people, like, oh, you're the best, you can do anything, and then
he
like,
tried.
No, I can't.
But then he recognized he couldn't. So we do what we can, guys. We do what we can.
So I'll go to bat for that. And so that's the end of my Shakespeare recommendations. But I would say that there's quite I don't know. The only Hamlet I really like is the Laurence Olivier, though. I felt like Gene Simmons' Ophelia was kind of underwhelming.
People like the one it's not an adaptation because it's not a film, but they have a copy of the play version, obviously, but taped, of David Tennant. So David Tennant, I think, did Hamlet, and people really like that one.
Yeah.
But as a play, I mean, it wasn't a movie.
I was considered the best one, the German production. So I actually haven't seen it, but everybody's always saying, "Oh, watch that! It's the definitive version of Hamlet." And he is a really good actor, so I could see Max von Sydow pulling that off.
Well, of course.
How do you say his name?
Sydow? I don't know.
I thought it was Sydow.
I don't know. That's why I said I'm not sure. It might be Sydow.
I'm always saying it both ways in my head, but he's good in everything. He's just a really good actor.
He died about 3 months ago. He got to avoid Captain Trips. Yeah, I know. I felt so sad when he died too, and I was like, well, now that I look back at it, he avoided a lot of sickness that would have killed like a 92-year-old dude anyway.
Yes.
So gotta have us. I would say that something about Shakespeare that disappoints me is I don't think I really like Macbeth as a play. It's got witches, it's got betrayal, it's got a prophecy. Backfires. It's so fun, and I haven't really seen a movie version of that. But even if you modern dated it, it'd be super fun.
A recommendation for that. It's not a movie, but it's a taped play starring Ian McKellen and Judi Dench.
Well, I can't hate that.
Oh, good.
But I'm like, someone should modern day that shit. I mean, it's got witches. It's got all the shit you want to watch in a play. It's way better than Hamlet. I'm just gonna say that.
Okay, I'm gonna add the caveat: if you modern day Macbeth, do not set it in a high school or a college or anything like that.
I'm like, you're going to war. You're gonna be like a grown-ass adult human who's going to war.
They sit back and they try to put everything
in high
school or freshman year of college, and it's like, stop it.
What if they're at military academies for college, guys? What if it's like at the Naval Academy?
No.
Prepping for war early.
No.
I'm just saying.
No.
My brain has an idea. Thank you. No,
wait,
I'm kidding.
Okay, wait.
I'm kidding.
Grade school, Macbeth.
Grade school Macbeth. Well, this one kid's got to go to jail now because he just murdered a whole bunch of people.
Oh, no, just take murder and change it to something kid friendly.
No, there's no point in murder if you can't get out of that damn spot. Like, there must be murder. There must be super murder and regicide.
Or
That's
making
it.
it look like you peed your pants. Isn't that the equivalent?
Yeah.
No, there's murder.
Crazy.
Must be murder if you have Macbeth. My other thing that I think about for adaptation, and before we like wind it down because I don't want to forget it, is like how well or poorly you can adapt the same book. Like I talked about it with Planet of the Apes, but one that comes to mind more recently is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, because the 1960s version is a really great movie and I love it, and it's very much atmospheric and it scares the hell out of me because I appreciate sort of the slow nuance in performance and just the cinematography, and it has like a very noirish feel to it. It's not that way, but the shadows, the way they can do stuff with it is scary. Then there's a 1999 Owen Wilson, Liam Neeson, Catherine Zeta-Jones version, which is mostly garbage, except you're right, the lead actress in that, who I always forget her name, is really good.
Taylor.
But then they've got like
So
CGI, like
good.
Ghost, and it's 1999 CGI and Owen Wilson one-liners, and it's garbage. And like, then it has this weird random storyline it didn't need about like saving the children of the mine. And no, I care about them too, Grandpa. It's terrible. But then, of course, the Netflix series from 2 years ago, or like 2 Octobers ago, is like amazing. And it's really nuanced. And it takes the horror, and instead of like adapting it so that they're strangers in an experiment, which is like the first version and the book, and God help us, the 1999 version, they like bring it back to they're a family who's lived in a haunted house. So most of the horror is what happens when a family falls apart through emotional trauma, and how can they deal with that? Like the ghost trauma that especially the two youngest children, the twins, experienced, made one of them, turn. And I can understand when you start seeing what he sees and all the ghosts that he sees, made him turn to drugs, and he's got a lifetime of like in and out of rehab and the trauma of that and taking care of him and just all this other stuff. And it's really this meditation on trauma. The ghosts are terrifying, don't get me wrong, but it's really this meditation on trauma and how it breaks the family apart. So the horror is very relatable. So that was clever, but you can go really, really wrong or really, really right. Don?
Yeah, one, I have a movie to movie comparison. Whereas like people are going back now and they're trying to remake a lot of the action movies from the 80s. And it's like,
oh yeah,
you can't do that. I was actually kind of scared that they were going to try to remake The Running Man, which was a Stephen King novella, I do believe.
It was originally, yes.
Yeah. So it's like don't try to remake The Running Man, because Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger versus Total Recall with Colin Farrell are two totally different movies. And my kid's dad, he was all like, it's a horrible movie, it's this, that, and the third, and he's a fanboy for 80s movies, as most people are. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it, and it's the same thing with the RoboCop adaptation, where
I feel like the original RoboCop is very
movie.
clearly a satire, and that's like the point of it, right?
Yeah, and it was like
the point.
They took these movies and they changed them up so much that they're not bad movies. It's just that they were dumb enough to keep the original title.
Yeah.
As Total Recall with Colin Farrell, it's an entertaining movie. It's a pretty good movie. If you take the Total Recall name off of it, if you look at it as just a movie and not as Total Recall, because we know this Total Recall is basically a battle for Mars.
Yeah.
Doug Quaid is, and I falter on the name because I'm keep thinking of Dennis Quaid in my head, but Quaid, he was this like double agent, triple agent, or whatever, that you find out did all of this stuff. And yes, they have same things in there. Sharon Stone versus Kate Beckinsale as the wife that is really there to just spy on you. But it's like, you could change a lot of these things that you tried to emulate from the original Total Recall, have an even better movie, and just not call it Total Recall. If you're going to adapt it honestly. Otherwise, don't even bother.
Well, what
With
I don't
about
always feel that way,
overdrawn
but
and
I think if you have a source
back?
material that's a book, then you're all going from that. It makes sense. If you're literally just adapting a movie to a different movie, like
Mhm.
either remake it with the technology of the time, but don't like there's like that reimagining versus like remaking. And I think you're right. Sometimes they reimagine it so much that there's no point to give it the same
They
title and it
should
just
have
makes
left
unfair
Right.
Raul
comparisons.
Julia overdrawn at the memory banks alone and never did another version.
Which one?
Overdrawn at the memory banks?
I've never seen it.
No.
Overdrawn at the memory banks?
I'm 36. I don't know what you're talking about.
Mystery Science Theater 3000? You never watched it? Oh
No.
my God, it's Total Recall. And it's so bad. It's wonderfully bad. Aram Fingal, Raul Julia plays the lead.
So he's
Uh,
basically the Arnold Schwarzenegger character before there
yeah,
was an Arnold Schwarzenegger. Not
he
before, but like before they
decides
made
to
it.
go into this virtual therapy. And oh my God, I thought you and I had even actually
I
discussed
think you've
Overdrawn at the
seen me the
Memory Bank.
link, but I think I forgot to watch it, or like I hadn't seen it.
Okay,
The
I
only one I
probably
remember the most
recommended
is like
it.
Panther Man or something. I've seen that one a lot.
Oh God, it's
That one's
Puma
terrible
Man.
too. That's it. That's it. That's not
Oh,
related to adaptations. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
yeah. Overdrawn at the Memory Banks is absolutely awful and it's wonderful. It's a really good bad movie. It's on YouTube, I think, the Mystery Science Theater version.
A lot of them are, which is nice. But yeah,
Really
I
look,
mean, are there
it's
other
the
80s?
best version of Total Recall, the most
Yeah.
entertaining version.
Well, yeah. But I mean, I can't think of other 80s movies that have got that they've started remaking a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Or it's hard to tell also because there's like sequel-itis too, because like you still get like Rambo Last Blood. But like I mean the actual remakes, they've started doing that a lot because they're like run out of ideas and they just want to cash cow. But
Yeah.
then they
I
just
think
you're
it's
right. Like I can see why
better.
your child's father would hate it because like if you change it enough, you'll
Yeah.
still it's gonna
They
anger the same fans, but it's not gonna get new ones either because it's not gonna be quite different enough to be engaging.
that and plus a lot of these movies that they're trying to change, they're trying to remake and change. In the 80s, they were rated R movies. These are clearly rated R movies.
Have been
And you're
cut.
trying to make a rated R movie into a PG-13
I
movie.
can't stand that.
And
And I say this as a horror fan. I can't stand it.
that's one of the reasons why RoboCop, the remake of RoboCop, failed.
RoboCop is a clear R. Like I've seen the original, even cut down for TV, but like that's the whole point. Is the hyper violent? Like it's a whole statement on the hyper violent culture and
Yes.
hyper violent like war against crime from the 80s. And like the whole point of it is it has to be hyper violent to like make its point. So
Yes.
like get PG-13 so you can get that PG-13 sweet teenager money at the movie theater is like cutting it out from under its knees.
The Sylvester Stallone adaptation of the comic Judge Dredd. Comics fans were not happy with it because they basically sugarcoated a lot of the stuff that was going down. And because of that, when the studios finally were like, okay, let's take a second shot at this, and they did Dread with Carl Urban and Lena
I like him. He
Headey.
choose good scenery.
That movie, it was like, oh damn. Where
Yeah,
they
I can imagine like when they do source material and they're like, well, let's neuter it. Like it doesn't help.
yeah,
Like it's a
yeah.
good thing Deadpool because of all the problems they got trying to even get it made and all the clips that leaked. I'm sure Ryan Reynolds helped with that. But like if you had neutered it and made it a PG-13 Deadpool, it would have sucked. Like some things have to be
Well,
is like violent.
hold on to your many hats with that one, because the rumors are that Marvel is trying to bring Deadpool in and they're going to PG-13 him.
I don't even queer him because he's like
Well,
pansexual in the comics. They won't even do that much in like
they
the
can
R-rated
do
ones. I'm just
that.
saying.
Yeah.
He did a PG-13 cut of Deadpool. The what was it? The Happily Ever After cut or something. I
Oh,
knew they
yeah.
were calling it.
But you know what? Here's the difference though. We already had the rated R version, and so he released the PG-13 cut as a joke.
Yeah, it's a joke on when you neuter a source material.
Whereas they legit want to be like, we're going to introduce Deadpool into the MCU,
Which is now very Disney-fied, of course.
and we are going to make
Literally.
him PG-13.
But that's not who he is. It's not who we've seen from the
That
first
is totally
movies.
not who he is.
We saw like the silent Deadpool in that terrible Wolverine movie, but that's why we got the good Deadpool. Yeah, we all think about it.
That's why he shot at Deadpool too.
I know. So like some people just don't get it. Sometimes source material like you'll do better if sometimes a movie is an R.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
Birds of Prey is an R. Like sometimes you just need to be a fucking R. I mean, I don't know if it did financially. It did
On certain
financially
kinds of
fine. It didn't like
actors.
blockbuster itself.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're gonna do a movie about someone who used to be the Joker's girlfriend, who's an anti-hero, who gets involved with a lot of mobsters, and the mobsters cut people's faces off. You know, sometimes that's just gonna be an R movie, guys.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like if you neuter it, then you lose all the impact of, you know, the gang violence and the effect it has on the women in the city, and, you know, dirty cops and all this other stuff that's going on that really sucks. And if you just
Yes.
neuter it, you just get a broader audience. What you do is ruin the source material. Like you ruin any type of personality your movie might have had. I have a big problem with, like, if we just cut it down to a PG-13, people will see it because as a horror fan that's very frustrating, because there's a long time, the mid 2000s into like, I would say about 10 years between like 2005 2015, 18, before they had all those really good indies that started coming out, like It Follows and like Midsommar and blah blah. That was
Oh,
just like, we'll just either remake a movie from the 1970s and like Platinum Dunes it and it'll be fine, or we'll just make a horror movie that's usually a remake, but we'll make sure it's a PG-13 so it's boring as hell.
Yeah.
And PG-13 horror movies are like PG-13 action movies. They're terrible.
Yeah.
If the movie was originally intended to be PG-13, I get that as an action flick. But if you're remaking something, you're right, like Total Recall, and you basically neuter it so there's not too much blood, it takes the effect away.
well,
I mean, and this is someone that has
PG-13 RoboCop.
this is coming from a female who has watched a lot of nonsense that I really shouldn't have watched as a kid. And this might sound like very, very lewd, but I'm sorry, having the 3-tit woman in Total Recall open up her thing like, hey, and she doesn't have a bra on, was like, oh damn, when you're a kid.
Yeah, it shocks the hell out of you.
Yeah,
Even
it
if
shocks the
you're
hell
just a
out of
girl
you.
kid. Yeah.
But then coming around, everyone was excited when they were like, okay, we're doing Total Recall. You have to have the woman with the 3 tits. You have to have the woman with the 3 boobs. You have to have the 3 boobed woman. And they have her, but she's wearing a bra.
No.
You
They should
missed
give
the
her 6
entire
boobs.
point. Yeah.
Because they
given her
can't do it that way because they'll get the R.
Right.
like a cat.
You can't get all the 13-year-old boys' money. So
Right.
So one other thing we touched on before was Dracula, and I just wanted to finish with the BBC Dracula. Neither of you have seen it?
No.
the one that's new to Netflix the last like year or
Yeah.
so. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
Without spoiling it, I will say I super recommend it. Its version of Van Helsing is my favorite ever version of Van Helsing. It part 1 is Hammer horror at its finest. It's basically like you're watching an old Christopher Lee movie. It's got that energy, right?
Yeah.
Part 2 is almost like it's more like a bottle episode, I would say. They kind of reimagine.
Oh, can you define a bottle episode for people who don't know what that is?
Oh, bottle.
Because I mean,
where
it's a term, and I've seen it a lot, but a lot of people don't know it.
Characters are trapped in a certain space and need to either survive or face each other or face themselves in a way they hadn't had to before.
So, like when you see Buffy, an example of a bottle episode is Older and Far Away, her birthday, where they're all trapped in season 6. They have to like talk to each other. Bottle
Yeah,
episode.
I guess so. Yeah, or Community when Annie can't find her pen and is accusing everybody of taking it, so nobody can leave the room until they've found this pen.
A lot of TV shows do it as a way to save money because you only have to use one location, but usually it forces people who have been lying to each other half the season to like tell each other the truth.
I think more work on a lot more work on the script, you know.
Yeah, it's very like character and dialogue heavy, those kind of episodes.
Episode 3, which at the end of episode 2, you're going to see where episode 3 goes, and a lot of people were like, "Well, I don't like this at all." But I would say to them, look, if you want to see an accurate adaptation of Dracula, there have been others made. This one wasn't trying to do that. This one was doing its own thing, and it does its own thing in part 3. And I will also say its version of Lucy is the only good version of Lucy. The only
she gets kind of underwritten.
version of Lucy that actually has a character. Actually, it makes it much more interesting than she has ever been. And yeah, so it's got a few surprises and a lot of the plot elements are switched around and different, but I think by the end it has a really good explanation of Dracula that makes it stand out. And I feel like a lot of it, once you just accept what's going to happen at the end of episode 2 into episode 3 has happened, just get over it because it's very entertaining, you know.
I always like hold off because like it's Moffat who made it, and I've never heard great things about like the stuff he did for like Sherlock and his seasons of Doctor Who. So I've always been nervous because the creator himself and I don't usually get like the
I
stuff he
liked
makes.
this.
I kind of hate him for.
I really did enjoy it, and I will say that the Van Helsing of this Dracula is my favorite Van Helsing. Your mileage may vary, but this one was my favorite.
I will definitely eventually check it out at some point in my life because I think it's worth. I mean, it's always worth. I always check out whatever Dracula is. I mean, I'm not gonna play. I like love to watch Dracula 2000 because it's terrible. So like I'll watch any version of Dracula no matter how terrible it is. Pretty much. As far as Rex for the week, what do you guys got on? I mean, we've worked a lot of adaptations to check out, but what is a rec in general?
Why don't you start?
Oh, good, because I do have one. We were talking last week about vampires, but just as a coincidence, my girlfriend Jenny just suggested that we watch What We Do in Shadows, not the movie, which I'd seen before, but the television show that's been on FX, and now you can watch the first 2 seasons on Hulu. So we watched the first 3 episodes, and then the other night was just like needed to decompress from like job training and everything else, and I ended up watching the rest of the first season and then honestly part into the second season where like Mark Hamill shows up in a guest starring role, and it's amazing and it's hilarious and I love it. And the movies are always really good, but this one, like each episode takes a chance to basically subvert or make fun of a different vampire stereotype. So like my favorite episode might be the one where they're planning for like the biannual vampire orgy, and they're explaining like if you don't host a good orgy, then your reputation is ruined and you just become a bat forever. And you know that they're shame bats because shame bats never fly as high as real bats because they're so sad, have no confidence. And so obviously something goes wrong. I'm sorry, spoilers. And the orgy obviously doesn't go. You're not going to have a full out like orgy on the middle of FX, but it's hilarious. And like the quest to find the right virgin for the orgy is hilarious. And it's just because that's such a stereotype of vampires, is they have like these great orgies and blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, the beginning of the first season is couched around their sort of boss. The Baron has come from overseas in Europe, and he's like, you must take over the world. Well, start with America. And they basically are trying to start with taking over. You'll love this, Staten Island, because that's where they live now. It's set in Staten Island, and it's
no.
It doesn't go well for them.
No.
One of the episodes, they decide they'll try and take over Staten Island by like infiltrating the city council, and it's hilarious. So you'll enjoy it because it's set in Staten Island. Like their neighbor is like from this very Staten Island dude. He invites him over to like watch football games and the Super Owl and all this stuff. Super Bowl. They don't know what the word is, but it's hilarious. But I love that it deconstructs different vampire lore things.
And they also they also flesh out 2 other vampires that weren't given much time in other vampire lore, which is the emotional vampire and the energy vampire.
Yeah, the psychic energy vampire, which is hilarious. Because to be honest, the psychic energy vampire Colin is probably the most powerful and the most good at his power than all of the other just blood vampires.
Yeah, the
really good. And I like how they actually have a girl vampire. Her name's Nadja, and she's a crazy one.
And Bernie Feldstein's in it too.
Yeah. And they have like obviously they have the stereotype of the reincarnated human lover, sort of a nod to that trope, but you also see in the Bram Stoker's Dracula from Coppola. But like it's like if
also
you know
in
all
Dracula, Dracula Untold, they did that too.
Yeah, but every time you like, I haven't seen that one, so that's good to know. But yeah, so they have like, you know, the vampire orgy episode or the reincarnated human lover subplot, like, or now the old one who's basically doesn't have a human shape anymore, is kind of bat faced, comes to tell us to take over the world. Like they subvert all these tropes because these guys are so like honestly freaking incompetent, just like in the movie, like they're terrible at being vampires. So like it's hilarious. So I definitely recommend it because if you know, it's like it's just such a clever dissection of the lore, but then there's actually plot going on. So I don't know if you like these characters. I mean, I like them. They're funny. They're not necessarily good people, so you don't necessarily root for them to succeed, but they're very hilarious.
It's like a Seinfeldian kind of thing.
Yeah, they're kind of like they're so bad at being vampires. They're just so bad at what they try and do. They can't even host an orgy right. Like they're terrible at it. I think my favorite is probably Nadja and her. I wish they had more of the storyline with her sort of fledgling is funny. And I guess my new favorite Van Helsing is probably Guillermo, because he has, sorry, spoilers, but eventually he finds out he's part of the Van Helsing line, but he's also their familiar. So it's kind of awkward because like he's actually got really good vampire killer instincts, but he's kind of waiting to be made a vampire. So Guillermo's like growing struggle into, oh shit, I'm actually a Van Helsing, or he's 3% Dutch and like 97% mestizo, but he's like, oh, that Van Helsing. So it's pretty funny. So Guillermo the Vampire Slayer is kind of burgeoning in the series.
Okay, Abby, you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I'm going to go through because I had such a big list of recommendations and I've crossed off everything I've talked about. I'm just going to really quickly just go through the year and the title of things I recommend, right?
Okay.
Okay, if you're one of my favorite version of Jane Eyre, 2006, starring Ruth Wilson and Toby Stephens. It's really great. Toby Stephens, by the way, is Maggie Smith's son.
Oh,
and
wow.
He's extremely sexy.
I just never realized that Maggie Smith ever had any kids because I've only seen her like a million years old.
Toby Stephens is her son. He plays Rochester. He's my favorite version of Rochester because he doesn't just walk around brooding. He's actually got a kind of a sarcastic wit and sense of humor. And you could see like chemistry between him and Jane. Instead of it being tragic, there's sort of a playfulness until things change. You know what I mean? You could see why they became so it's my favorite version of
Sorry,
Jane
my
Eyre.
brain is still back at McGonagall ended up having a hot son, and I'm just like, it can't compute in my head.
He is so
or the Mother Superior from
swear.
Sister Act, whichever you prefer. I'm like, oh, that's weird. I've only seen her as like 100 years old. It's so weird.
That's the best version of Jane Eyre for me. I've watched it quite a few times. The both of them just have amazing chemistry. They do a great job, and they actually lighten up the dialogue between Jane and Rochester to where you're like, I understand why these two like each other, instead of it just being like, hey, she's cute and innocent. Hey, he's brooding and tragic.
Let me hide my wife in the attic more.
I would say that it was just every other version had been sort of colored by Catherine and Heathcliff, in my opinion. Okay. This was like there was a playfulness that was nice. Other thing, okay, so here are my Jane Austen adaptations in order of rank. Okay.
Oh my god.
Number
so scientific.
8. I know. Because I decided to rank them after I lifted them.
Oh my god.
Number 8. This is my top 8. This taking Pride and Prejudice out of the equation. I already told you all my Pride and Prejudice stuff.
Okay, we know. Okay. I mean, the Pride and Prejudice one, so we'll forgive you if they're like not in there right now.
Number 8 is 2020 Emma, starring Anya Taylor-Joy. I really did enjoy most of the casting, a lot of the choices, a lot of the music. The only problem I had with it was that Emma was very cold and unlikable, and she didn't really become much less so. And my same problem with Gwyneth Paltrow's Emma. Actually, I would put them on an even keel for me. The 1996 and 2020 are both okay versions of Emma, right? So those are my number 8s. Those put together are my number 7. I changed that. Okay, yeah, number 7 is both the 1996 and 2020. Both have the same problem. And also there's a really weird WTF scene in the 2020 Emma that when you see it, you're going to be like, what? Okay, that happened. But it's still a good adaptation. So is the 1996 Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth Paltrow once again played Emma a lot like she is in real life, unapproachable and unlikable.
She's like Gwyneth Paltrow is what you're saying.
Yeah, she played Gwyneth Paltrow but put on a British accent. So it was even colder. The 2007 version, number 6 is my 2007 version of Sense and Sensibility. It's pretty good, I think. Right? Number 5 is the 1995, which is actually better even though it's shorter. They are both kind of equal to each other in my opinion. I enjoy them both. But I think the 1995 is just slightly better because Alan Rickman is in it. And he was the only man in that movie that was hot enough for me to be like, oh, I don't want her to be with the hot young guy. Get with the hot old guy, because he was Alan Rickman and I have such a So and then number 4 is Persuasion from 1995, starring Kieran Hines and Amanda Root. I like it better than the 2000 version, starring Rupert Penry Jones and Sally Hawkins. Even though those two are a lot better looking than Kieran Hines and Amanda Root, I like the fact that they were just people who just seemed kind of plain in the beginning, and by the end of the movie, you're in love with them both and you want them to be together forever. It's a beautiful story of second chance, beautiful second chance romance. Number 3 is the 2009 version of Emma, starring Romola Garai and Johnny Lee Miller. It's so good. Michael Gambon as Emma's father is the first time Emma's father has been lovable.
Johnny Lee Miller's the guy who's from the CBS show Sherlock, right? Or Elementary?
Yeah.
Elementary.
He plays Knightley. And I think he does a great job. Romola Garai plays Emma with this bratty, kind of funny energy that's very similar to my number 1 version of Emma, which we'll get into in another minute. Number 2 is 1999's Mansfield Park, which is actually way better than the book. So much better than the book. Instead of Fanny Price being just this moralizing, poor little me girl just who's swept about and, you know, it's like a morality tale almost, the other version. She's so meek and she's so nice and she follows her principles and everyone realizes she's right in the end, right? And I'm like, ugh. But this other version is more feminist friendly. It's so good. Patricia Roxama is the one that directed it, and it stars Frances O'Connor and Johnny Lee Miller. Once again, Johnny Lee Miller is in a really good Jane Austen adaptation. I really recommend it because instead of Fanny Bryce bucking against a marriage because of her morality, she's bucking against it because she loves another and because she doesn't trust that person. And all, and it's more about her, you know, inner intuition. And the other, okay, number 1 Jane Austen adaptation that's not Pride and Prejudice, Clueless.
Good. I was hoping someone would mention that because I really like Clueless.
Romola Garai and Alicia Silverstone are the 2 best versions of Emma because, yeah, she's a little spoiled and a little bratty, but she's also lovable and caring, and she's kind of has this energy where you could see why people would want to be around her or why she would be such an influencer among her friends. You know,
a vintage hot Paul Rudd who looks exactly like now Paul Rudd because he may also be a vampire.
That's all my Jane
Paul
Austen.
Rudd is a vampire. There is no May.
Oh yeah, I'm like, he's like 50 and he still looks like 25, and I'm like, whose soul did you sell yourself to? Like, you know,
yeah, you know,
crossroads deal you make, buddy.
Have you guys seen Westworld? Sandy Newton is in her 50s. Screw that girl.
Yeah.
And she's running around naked all through that show.
Yeah, I remember she was in Interviews with the Vampire. She gets eaten in like one of the early scenes. Sorry. Yeah. So like she's definitely been around for a very long.
If you haven't, Cyrano de Bergerac, if you saw
oh God, not like Sarah Burgess is a loser. Don't recommend
I know.
That. Okay.
Don't watch that. Watch The Truth About Cats and Dogs, which is the good gender flipped version of Cyrano, starring Janine Garofalo and Uma Thurman and Ben Chaplin. It's really good, and if you haven't seen it, it's really adorable. And the other is the Steve Martin version, Roxanne, which is a great comedic version.
I was waiting for someone to say that because I really enjoyed that too, and I didn't know what Cyrano de Bergerac was when I saw it. What about you, Dawn? What you got?
I didn't know what it was either until after I had seen Roxanne quite a few times, and I just saw a picture of who's supposed to be Cyrano, and it was funny because when that movie came out, I was a kid, and I really didn't know that much, and so I'm like, why is this Roxanne? Why is this Steve Martin up here? And my dad was like, no, Roxanne was based off of that. That was not based off of Roxanne. I'm like, oh, okay.
Reverse adaptation centuries ago. So you got any Rex for us this week, Dawn?
Oh, me? It's my turn. I do not have as many. I have.
No, I appreciate the Jane Austen list because that is obviously well thought out, and
yeah,
I'm so glad because I didn't get to mention Clueless because I don't know much about Emma the original source material.
I've been thinking about this my entire life, so.
But Clueless is like my favorite. Is one of my favorite '90s teen movies. It's so funny, and I can always go with the. But Mr. Whoever, I was surfing the Crimson Wave. I had to haul ass to the ladies. He's like, I assume that deals with feminine problems, so you're excused. And I'm like, yep. Best line
That's
ever.
it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
It's a really good version.
It is. It's funny. It's funny as hell.
Okay, my recommendations. One of my recommendations is a movie that was adapted from a game, and it has absolutely no business being as good as it is. Clue.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God! When we were talking about Tim Curry, I was going to mention it. My friend Bobby watched Clue for the first time this month, and I was like, "Oh, you never saw Clue?"
Yeah. So
I love
Clue.
I hated her so much. Flames
on
the sun.
Heaving the side of my face.
I'm a horrible person because then I was thinking like Clue is the inverse of Battleship. Because like Battleship is one of the worst movies I've ever seen based on a board game, but Clue is based on a board game and it's amazing. So
You know what?
there you go.
Clue, Battleship, I enjoy
But it's
for
distracting
the
because it's like not a Matt Damon, that
for the,
ugly like redheaded dude. It's so I'm like, is that
for
Matt
this.
Damon? But it's not.
I enjoyed Battleship for the simple fact that it is a very entertaining 2-hour commercial to join the Navy.
Oh, it definitely is.
I said that to my brother-in-law, who at the time was in the Navy, and everyone who is in the armed service, I do thank you profusely for your service. But yeah, between Battle Los Angeles and Battleship, it's like those to me are 2-hour commercials to join the military because you get to fight aliens.
God, I
They
hope not. I
do
don't think our Space Force is ready yet for that.
they do better at advocating for joining the military than Starship Troopers, but
Yeah.
that's its own.
Well, it's also really a satire of its
Yeah.
own. To be fair to it, it is a
Yeah.
satire.
Another recommendation that I have is from anime manga to live action movie.
That's a
which
risk
is very
too.
rare.
It's very hard.
Rurouni Kenshin.
Oh yeah, I think you've told me this before. That's a good adaptation.
They did live action. They did a live action adaptation of the first 2 seasons, and they have made them into live action movies, starring Takeru Saito, and from the original Masked Rider
Okay.
TV show. And they nailed it like on the head with doing the adaptation. They took out enough filler. They took out,
which, by the way, you have to do
yeah,
in Night Shyamalan, or else you try and cram 22 episodes into 2 hours, and you can't do that. Sorry, still bitter.
hour and a half
for everybody else. Yeah, I'm just like, I don't
hour
know.
and a
You
half.
can't
That makes it even worse.
adapt a TV show that has like 20 plus episodes, just a season into a movie, but it's good that they knew to take out filler.
Yeah, they found the key elements, and they did take, the only thing that they changed, really changed, was they took a character that we aren't introduced to until season 2 and put him in season 1, but the way they worked everything out, it still made sense. So it's a trilogy of movies. Movies 4 and 5 should be coming out sometime in the 2021 area. I'm thinking,
When we're allowed to make movies again.
Right. That's why
everything that
I'm
we're like might be coming is like whenever we're allowed to.
2021 now.
Yeah.
Whereas they're making movies of one arc that was never done as an anime, and then one arc from the original, like, this is how Kenshin became Batosai the Manslayer, this is how he got the cross-shaped scar, this is all of this stuff.
Origin story.
Yeah. So that I'm waiting for those, but yes, there's that. And then my last recommendation is from book to anime.
Okay.
I already talked about Romeo and Juliet, but then there's another favorite that I have.
Okay.
They gave it a sci-fi adaptation.
Well, I see this is a running pattern in Japan. Like, yeah. Oh, here's a book. Sci-fi.
They put it into a futuristic sci-fi world, and it is called Gankutsuo, the Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh, that'd be fun. That'd be so fun. There's no wrong way to adapt that, because I say also revenge.
He came back. Edmond Dantes. He was a part of the Space Force. And
sorry, now I realize
I
can't stop laughing.
Yeah,
but I'm sorry.
We're not going there. We're not going there.
We're space medic for the Space Force.
He was a space sailor, so that makes it even worse. So yeah.
So was he a space seaman? I'm sorry, I'm 5. I can't. Sorry.
Okay, even above the stars.
We're going to put Ivy in a corner once this is done, so she can think about what she said. But no, Edmund, he goes and he commits a crime. He's set up for this crime and all this stuff, and he's sent to what's supposed to be the Chateau d'If. He is sent to this prison in deep space where he is tortured. And in being tortured, he goes from being a human male to coming back, and now he's like blue and looks totally different. He looks like a space alien. Um so when he's pulling all of his strings and he's pulling all of his machinations and everything, they legit have no clue who this is.
Because they couldn't.
You know, unlike, and I'm going to say this, but also I love the Jim Caviezel version of the Count of Monte Cristo, because him and Guy Pearce, they play off of each other so well, and Guy Pearce is just, he has become like that asshole in movies to me. But yeah, it's like he doesn't come back with a goatee and no one knows that it's him. That was like my only thing, like, okay, he looks exactly the same, he just has a goatee now. Really, come on now. No, this when he comes back, he left, he was a human, he comes back and he's blue and he's an alien. Another thing that they kept it the same from the book. They changed it from the movie, because in the Jim Caviezel version, Albert ends up being his son. Spoiler, not spoiler, the movie was from like 2003. Whereas in the anime, he is not the Count's son. The Count has been gone for like 20 years. Albert is only like 16, 17 years old. He has his own coming of age story where there's a lot more that they deal with from the book in this anime series. And one of those things is his love for the Count, where it's like, even in the last episode, you're like, yes, Albert at least got a kiss from him. Good. So yeah. Because you see he's having this push-pull, because he's supposed to be engaged to this girl who then dumps him, and she ends up being engaged to this other dude who's really her brother, and we're trying to see all of this stuff just fall. You see how the Count put all of these pieces together, and everything just totally, not even fall apart, but just crumble like dust under everyone. And that is like, to me, that is like, this is just awesome. So I would suggest, it was all, there are 3 series that came out around the same time that were adaptations of classic books or cinema. It was Romeo Juliet, which we've already talked about, The Count of Monte Cristo, which is one of my recommendations, and another sleeper hit recommendation is another anime called Seven Samurai. They were all done by the same people around the same time.
Seven Samurai based on?
Seven Samurai is big. No, actually, I'm saying it wrong. The anime name is Samurai 7. It's based off of the Akira Kurosawa movie Seven Samurai, which was the precursor to the Magnificent Seven. And again, sci-fi twist. You have all of these samurai walking around in this futuristic world, and they have to help this village because these bandits are coming, they're stealing their rice, and the empire is trying to take it over, and everything goes sideways by the midpoint of the series, and you're just like, so yeah, it's like those are my recommendations.
Thank you. I'm just like very excited for all like the sort of like anime taking it to the future, sort of with classic literature.
I have one reverse recommendation. Two reverse recommendations, because the movies are so much more well known than the books, and I feel like the books are really, really great. So, The Princess Bride, classic, awesome movie. Whenever I hear about them wanting to make a remake, I'm like, why? Because it was perfect, right? But the book, the original book, is absolutely adorable. And William Goldman, who just passed away this last year, has just a wonderful author's voice and just this sly kind of humor that's just throughout. That it's just great. It's it's a really good book. I mean, there's so many funny parts about it. I think I won a speech competition with it. You know, when I was doing forensics club or whatever. You know, you had your prose and you know you had your debate, you had this and that. I won a prose competition on it and everything because it was just such a distinct, crisp piece of writing with so many funny characters. It's just amazing. The Princess Bride, the book, is every bit as good as the movie. And the only reason that they might ever want to remake it is maybe to do a mini series version based off the book itself. But then again, it was just done so well that I just don't see a reason to. The other
Funny, there's always a cash grab that some idiot exec thinks of.
Yeah.
I can see it being a mini series though, with that same sort of humor as the book. You know what I mean? Which tells the story. There's a lot of jokes about war and the futility of it, and jokes about who was the most beautiful woman in this year and who was the most beautiful woman in that year. You know what I mean? Like all these like rankings of things around the world that you could just tell it's a weird yarn that a guy is making up for his kid. You know, and that's part of the story. It's Peter Falk's character is basically the narrator of this. And the other is Diane Wynne Jones' Howl's Moving Castle, because the version, the anime version, it's good. It's good. It's just like it's a fan fiction of that story. And I would love a straight up adaptation with all the same humor in it. Plus, there's a twist that is present in Howl's Moving Castle, the book, about 2/3 of the way through, that is not in the movie at all. And I was like, when's the twist coming? Because I remember
It's
reading
not.
before I saw the movie, and I was just like, when I read the book, I was like, I just dropped. I'm like, what the flip? Like that actually happened. That is so cool. That's one of the things I loved about Howl's Moving Castle, the book. Not present at all in the adaptation, but then again, the adaptation is a reimagining, almost like a fan fiction of it. It's a great fan fiction. I would just love to see a straight up adaptation. I think it would take a mini series to do it justice, but I would love that with with Julie Andrews narrating or something.
I think that's a lot. I think we've hit them. Like, you guys will have a list of adaptations from here until next Tuesday, just to go through. So take it away, Dawn.
So the takeaway is, if you are going to do an adaptation, listen up, Hollywood. If you're going to do an adaptation, in order to do it faithfully, make it a miniseries. Because there are things, or rewrite it enough so that it makes sense.
Yeah, consider that film's its own medium and you can't cram stuff in, or that you're going to lose nuance. So pick what you want to be the big points.
Here's looking at you, cats. Anyway.
That's just someone who really likes fur suits, and I don't want to know what all else, and I don't get it.
Yeah, well, I have problems with him thinking that the Phantom of the Opera was a romance to begin with. So yeah. Yeah, and
I could see people shipping it, writing fan fiction, not Andrew Lloyd Webber himself.
He thought it was because he wrote it and then wrote a sequel called Love Never Dies. So there you go.
When there was an interview. I was watching him do an interview, and he was saying that he was trying to look for this epic love story, and he read the novel, The Phantom of the Opera. And he was like, oh, this is great. I can make a romance out of this, and blah, 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 blah. And then the musical was born.
No.
And so, because
that guy makes Edward Cullen look not emotionally unstable. So
because of that, I ended up and it was free on the Kindle. And so I downloaded the original Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, and I think that's how you pronounce his name. And
I don't speak French.
And just no. I ended up putting up a blog post talking about The Phantom of the Opera is not a romance.
Wow. Lindsay Ellis just had a great little breakdown of some things involved.
Stalking is love. I don't want to be right.
Conversation.
Yeah.
In every way.
Yeah. So, all right. So those are our recommendations for you. We are gonna get ready to go. So join us again next week. We have no clue what the topic is gonna be yet.
It'll be a
So
surprise for all of us.
yeah. So join us, same bat time, same bat channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the little bell to get the ding dong where you get notified.
Sorry. Sorry. I'm gonna have to go to my corner. So.
Oh,
Yes, we're gonna
brains in
send Ivy to the corner. We will see you later, YouTube, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.